Welcome back to another episode of the My Latin Life podcast. Since 2014, My Latin Life has been your trusted guide to traveling and living in Latin America. Today, I'm joined by Mark Zolo, aka the Naughty Nomad, for his second appearance on the podcast. Mark, how's it going, man?
How you doing, man? I'm doing well. A little spiritually depleted from my sailing trip, but otherwise in good spirits.
Awesome. And for people who don't know, Mark Zolo was our second guest on the podcast. Our very first episode was the OG Vance, the founder of My Latin Life. And our very second episode, our first guest ever, was Mark Zolo. So really happy to have him back. Mark, for people who don't know you, do you want to give a little background?
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. It was an honor to be the first guest on, actually. So for the guts of my 20s, for over 10 years, I ran a website called naughtynomad.com. It was basically the number one resource in men's travel. I wrote over 100 city guides for dudes about like where to pick up, and I talked a bit about legal narcotics as well, and traveled to 120 countries. I've also written 3 books. The first one, Naughty Nomad, got to number one on Amazon for travel writing. Then I wrote a book on New York, a guide. And then my latest book, My Life as a Mexican Pirate, my best work, I would say, also got to number one on Amazon for adventure travel. And it's just come out on Audible as well. So that took an insane amount of work. I did like 1,000 hours, I think well over 50 different accents. It was a serious
Wow.
project. I did not expect it to be so big, but I'm delighted now it's finally out.
Yes. So the former Naughty Nomad, you've actually accomplished a lot, man. I feel in your life, you're a owner of multiple pubs. You've moved to Malta, the European island. You're a musician. You have a master's degree, and you've sailed around the Mediterranean and the Caribbean. As you mentioned, visited 120 countries as well, including a lot of the difficult ones. So yeah, man. One of the most interesting guys out there for sure. And I think the audience is going to love this episode.
Oh, thanks so much. I forgot about all that other stuff.
So I had a question for you. You've always kind of styled yourself as a pirate, I guess early on, just as a costume or kind of as like a conquistador, and you just kind of like the motif. But when did you actually start learning how to sail?
So the pirate thing kind of came up as a bit of a joke. It was after I wrote my first book, Naughty Nomad. We kind of did it as a fun weekend thing in Germany. This whole Mexican pirate thing. One of my friends wanted to do a pub crawl dress as pirates. It was during Oktoberfest. And my other friend wanted to do like we dressed as Mexicans, and we decided, hey, let's combine the two and be the pirates of the Sangarian. There's a song with that, but let's see if we sing it later. But anyway, it kind of got out of control, and 30
Actually, before we
countries.
move on, you got
Yeah.
to give us the song right now.
Well, okay. Well, you see, we wanted to start a party and wondering what to do. We all made our suggestions and we narrowed it down to 2. One idea was drink sangria, sombreros, one and all. The other was dress as pirates and embark in a pub crawl. But then we all decided, wouldn't it be obscene to combine the two and be the pirates of the Sangarina? Something like that.
Hey, woo!
Something like that. There's more to it, but that's the gist, yeah.
Oh man, I love Irish people.
And we got
That's
the gift of the
awesome.
gab. Yeah, we're a musical race.
The gift of the gab. Random question: have you ever been to the Blarney Stone?
No, I have not been to the Blarney Stone because I'm not an American tourist.
uh,
uh,
where were we? So, where did you actually start to learn how to sail?
so it's actually kind of a funny story because I kind of want to always trying to up the ante with my adventures. And originally, I got into microlight planes. So I started training for a microlight license in Northern Ireland to fly these tiny little planes. They're basically like a motorbike with wings. I don't know if you guys have seen them. It's you're exposed. You have a big kind of a propeller on the back. It
Hmm.
fits 2 people, and it's a paragliding wing. So it's very it's like basically like a motorized paraglider, And there was a guy I believe who went around the world in one of them. At one point, you have to do in stops along the way. They can only go so far, and they're very prone to bad weather. They can't deal with much, and it's not that expensive to buy them. But the problem was the weather in Ireland was always so bad. My flights kept getting cancelled, and I'd have to drive like 2 hours up to Northern Ireland. The reason why is the British licensing was
Hmm.
10 hours less than the European licensing. So, but anyway, I tried to redo it in Malta as well years later, but just the same problem, just getting lessons. Anyway, I abandoned this plan because I thought it wasn't the best way to get around, like travel. I really wanted to do it like maybe in Africa. Um, but firstly, I hate heights, so
Mm.
I clocked up a load of hours. But I was still terrified doing the whole time, and also just the logistics of landing planes and stuff like that. It just didn't seem that viable, and it seemed like a very, very, very expensive hobby. So then I that kind of was the start of what's when I started looking for alternative means of travel to make it extra adventurous. I was thinking of, oh God, I'd love to do horseback, maybe go through Central America on horseback. But then again, that comes with all sorts of issues. Then I was thinking about the Caribbean because I was in New York. I was living in New York. And I thought, hey, it'd be crazy because we were doing the Mexican pirate thing. I said, what if we go from Miami all the way to Venezuela with jet skis? So you could basically, because nowhere is more than
Hmm.
a day sail away. And I worked out the whole logistics of it. When you fill up, you could go between every island. You'd never have to refuel. Because the distances between every island is so small. It's actually viable to do the jet ski thing.
Hmm.
And I thought, well, it'd be a jet ski pirate gang. That'd be fucking crazy. I don't think anyone's done that either. Like, done something so
Yeah, that'd be a
wild.
first.
But then I started thinking of what was that like really. I didn't realize how rough the weather is in the Caribbean. And by the way, when I went there on this sailing trip, I got the shock of my life. But but mainly it was like, what happens if something breaks down? You're screwed. Your friend will have to tow you. You're also reliant on other people. But I started looking into the cost of it, and then I was like, oh, I wonder if there was three or four of us getting jet skis. If we just combined our money, what would we do? We could buy a sailboat maybe. And that's when I kind of went down the rabbit hole, and I realized that you can get sailboats pretty cheap. And I got really excited about this idea because not only can you travel for free on the wind, you don't have to spend on fuel, but also your accommodation is sorted. So I was like, okay, this makes a lot of sense. This whole sailing thing. So I signed up for a class in New York and sailed the Hudson. Did a ASA 101, which is basic
Hmm.
keelboat. And I loved it. I love sailing. But then at the end of my time in New York, about 2 years, I had enough to buy a boat, but didn't have enough to basically fund myself for the whole trip. And I had to think about where I was going to store it afterwards. And there was lots of variables I hadn't sorted out. My life wasn't really sorted out at that point. Fast forward a couple of years, moved to Malta, got my finances sorted out, set up a bar that led to another bar, another bar, another bar. Where the franchise I founded is 4 bars strong now, as well
Wow.
as importing company, import a lot of beers from Poland. Also have our own branded beer that I actually designed the labels and everything. So build up kind of. I also got some real estate here as well. So in 5 years I built up a pretty decent foundation here, and that was the time to also bought some Bitcoin early on, which is good at around 630. So sold everything now, but I traded it for Boatcoin. So yeah, I took the plunge. First, I bought a boat in Marseille, France,
Hmm.
in about 2 years ago. Bought it. Wanted to sail it to Malta, but it was the end of October. The weather was absolutely awful. Had to turn back. So sorry. First of all, I did a day skipper course in Malta, which is like a week long course to get me more qualified. And I
Hmm.
went over with my instructor to bring the boat back. It was an Alpha Vega 27. Cost me around 6,500, very cheap, but it's a solid boat. But the weather was merciless, and it was kind of stormy. We were getting 30 knots of wind. Day three, I think it was, there was a fire in the engine room, and we had to get rescued from the Sardinian Coast Guard. It was a horrific experience. And I detailed it in a video I have up on YouTube called, I think it's my first sail or something like that.
Hmm.
Um, and that was a really terrible experience. I have to be honest.
And you still have the boat, right?
That boat is still in Sardinia. I did sail it now around Sardinia. So there was another trip I think last summer. So I got it working, got it fixed, and then me and two Italian friends of mine, we took it, and it was the best sail I ever did. It was like a week long. Just took it around the coast. These guys were absolute heroes. They're fellow adventurers. One guy, he bought a bike and went all across Asia. They're like digital nomad types. They're all around the world having adventures. Cool guys,
Hmm.
very cool guys. And they knew about me through my Instagram, my blog, and stuff. So they were readers of mine, I believe. And that's how they got in contact. But very cool. But yeah, anyway, so after that trip, eventually bought the boat in the Caribbean in Grenada, and that thus began my trip earlier in January, where I wanted to do all the Lesser Antilles because it's the only countries I haven't been to in the Caribbean,
Hmm.
which is the island chain, the kind of eastern island chain of the Caribbean, which encompasses around, I believe it's 8 countries and 13 territories. And that was
And
really the adventure
before
lifetime.
we get into
Yeah.
the Caribbean sailing trip, because that's absolutely epic, and I want to spend a lot of time on that. I want to set the stage a little bit. So you bought your first boat in Marseille. At this point, you had done, a little sailing course in New York, and then another short one in Malta. Did you do it at the Royal Malta Yacht Club? I think
No, it was a pro sailing Malta.
Pro Sailing Malta,
Yeah,
and that
yeah.
was also like relatively short. How many times had you actually gone sailing prior to saying, "I'm going to go across the Mediterranean"?
Well, that was my first offshore sail. So, and I never like done night sailing, or it was just literally a week's worth of course. And
Don't you think you should have prepared a little more?
well, I bought my instructor with me. He's a young guy, Italian
Okay.
guy. He's only 25, but he's a water baby. He's been sailing since he was young, and he was kind of shocked when he saw the boat. He's like, "Oh my god, we're gonna take this thing across." If it was any other sailor that was older, they would have said, "Hell no," because it was a little 27 footer. Had to buy.
Hmm.
He made me do a few things though. He made me buy a life raft, obviously, because so the weather was brutal at the end of October, early November in the Mediterranean. It was just the weather was so bad, and life jackets. Make sure everything we had. This boat, the two boats I got. One thing I did was pick solid sound boats. There's a class of boats that were built in the late 60s to early 80s, called classic plastics. They were made a lot thicker than the modern counterparts because they were the first fiberglass boats and they didn't know how thick to make them. So they made them super thick, and they have these big long keels, these big long bottoms. So they're very, very sturdy. And there was about 40, 50 models that were built called pocket cruisers, which could cross oceans at that size. Modern boats of that size, let's say 27 to 35 foot, would be a lot more flimsy and
Hmm.
wouldn't be necessarily suited for ocean crossing. So I invested in good, strong old keel boats. Now, the problem with that is old boats, old problems. The rigging, old, sails old, the engines, the electronics, and
Hmm.
that's what led to a lot of issues on trips. So the engine fire was obviously because it was just old wiring and so yeah, and on my Caribbean trip, you wouldn't believe the amount of trauma and incidents that occurred. It was absolute disaster, if I'm being frank.
Hmm. Yeah, I
Um,
watched the video you just posted a couple days ago to prepare for this conversation. So I watched the 10-minute video and saw you doing a lot of tinkering on the boat.
Yeah, well, wait till you see what happens in future episodes because I basically ran the whole gambit of things that could go wrong, did go wrong. I talked to other sailors on the trip, because I was meeting sailors all the time, and I had more trouble than any of them had in 50, 60 years in that trip. Partly
Because you
because
bought a boat in the Caribbean that was like abandoned, or
yeah, 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 it was in a Nicholson 32. Yeah, I mean, so it was an old boat, 1969, Big, huge keel on it though. So like the body of it was a monster. I mean, when I took it out of the water, I had to get it fixed at one point. The
Hmm.
bottom of it, even though the boat was smaller than any of the boats in the marina, there was a lot. Everyone has 40, 50 footer boats. The bottom of this thing was absolutely massive. Big, thick, long keel on it. You could take these things to Antarctica.
And I'm realizing now that the phrase even keel must come from boating.
Oh, there's so many terms. When you start boating, you realize that so much of the English language is derived from sailing terms. Give it a little leeway, things like that.
Ah.
There's loads of little nuggets, and it's a whole language sailing.
Hmm.
There's all sorts of there's also
Yeah, I've been trying to get into it this past summer. I think partly you inspired me as well. I think you inspired Jake Nomada as well, and the two of us are really thinking about in the future doing something similar to what you're doing. And so that's part of where my questioning comes from. Is that this is something that I think every man wants to do at some point is learn how to sail and master the seas and stuff. And so you've already done it to some extent. You've been doing cross Mediterranean and cross Caribbean sailing trips, and so we're all trying to glean pieces of advice and inspiration from it.
Yeah. Well, I think the sea mastered me more so. I mean, I can tell you a couple of things that happened. I mean, do you want to go into that now, or is there any other back or any
No,
other?
that I think before the mishaps, maybe just explain again to the audience what your plan was originally.
So my plan, so this region I'm talking about, you guys can pull it up on a map. The Lesser Antilles. It's from Venezuela to Puerto Rico, these chain of islands, and
Hmm.
I it was the last countries I'd yet to visit in the Caribbean. So kind of I have an overall arching goal of visiting every country in the world. I don't take it as seriously as I used to, but it's nested in my life goals, I suppose. And this is the best place in the world to kind of visit by or explore by sea because all the islands are no more than a day sail away.
Hmm.
And with the constant trade winds going from east to west, and you're going up and down, which is ideal to go basically perpendicular to the wind. That's kind of like ideal sailing conditions. Um, and so it was the perfect place to sail. Now, I was under the impression that it was the perfect place to sail as a beginner, but that was not the case. In fact, I was diving in the deep end really because the weather just kind of blew my mind a bit,
Do
especially
you think you did it in the wrong season?
no, because this hurricane season is between I think July and the end of October.
Hmm.
That's all. Now, apparently, the sailing is wonderful, but the risk of hurricanes that's kind of
Right.
that's a no
So the
go.
best time I'm assuming is kind of December to April.
Yeah, especially after January, like February, March, April. Because I noticed this closer it got to summer, the more it calmed down, the seas calmed down, the wind calmed down. December and January, you get this thing called the Christmas winds, which, by the way, I was not aware of this phenomenon. And it's there's actually really, really strong weather. So when I first, like my first 2 3 weeks, the weather was absolutely brutal. We were getting big 2 meter waves, and up to you can get up to 25 30 knots, and it got really dicey. And so I think at some point I was hitting 3 meter waves. 3 meter waves are going up to Antigua, and these are big seas. It doesn't sound like much, but they feel massive on a tiny boat like that. It's very intimidating.
Right. Because the boat's only so tall.
Yeah, yeah, and those boats, those classic plastics, the water line is quite low to the water, so you
Hmm.
get a lot of spray. We're getting whole waves just coming over the side and just drowning me,
Hmm.
or drowning us, should I say? And we had the unfortunate so this goes into the bad things that happen. We had a fortunate series of events where I called abandoned ship twice, believe it or not, because of we were sinking at one point. So Yeah, this goes into my series of bad things that happen. I have so many things.
Sure, go for it. Go for it. Stream of
Um,
thought.
so okay, so the I guess the first thing that kind of happened, which I thought was a nothing thing, but the thing is, every small thing on a boat that you do wrong can lead to a catastrophe down the line. That's what I learned. I learned a lot. I didn't know anything about engines or rigging when I started the trip, and I had to learn fast because we ran into all sorts of trouble. But one small thing, you would think this is the most harmless thing in the world. I I never fished before, right? And I said, okay, I'll try some line fishing, which is basically without a rod, you throw out a line and have a lure on it. And I threw out this fish. The very first sail I did, right? My parents came for the first month of the trip, right? I got them to do a competent crew course, which is like a week long course, but it's not as advanced as day sailor, just so they can help out. So we come out of we finally get the boat ready. There was all sorts of things wrong with it, but it took about 2 weeks to get it sorted. Come out, and just for about just a few nautical miles, when we were rounding the island, we hit the Atlantic for the first time. And it was really, really rough. I got kind of a big fright. But it was only for a couple of miles. So we rounded the island and we hit the Caribbean side where it's calm. You're sheltered
Hmm.
from the sea.
Hmm.
So it was a calm day. We were going pretty slow because the bottom of the boat was had basically a jungle on it. There was like lice and snails and crabs, and it was just filthy. All these barnacles. And I cleaned the propeller, but I couldn't clean the whole boat because it was just too much work. I was going to get it done professionally along in the next place. Anyway, and also we're getting used to the boat. We were going slower than I expected. I expected to go to the next island that day, Carriacou, but didn't make it. Had to stop halfway up Grenada. Um, so anyway, I put out this fishing line because things are going pretty smooth when we round the island. Uh, didn't think anything of it. Realized we had to stop early because we are going too slow. Um, never. Now I'd never. I say I'd anchored a boat. I'd practiced anchoring. In Sardinia with the Italian guys. One of the Italian guys I was with, he was a more experienced sailor than me, and this was the first time me captaining a boat. So
Yeah,
anyway,
just you and your parents.
yeah. And they didn't really have a clue. They knew the basics, but they'd never been on a sailing boat like up till 2 weeks prior. Anyway, so managed to get the anchor down first time attempting it, and that was all fine. But one thing I forgot to do foolishly was to put the fishing line in, pull the fishing line in after the sail. I had left it out there. Now this led to a series of unfortunate events that actually nearly sank us. Let me explain. So when I was reversing, when we put down the anchor, and you have to kind of reverse when you're anchoring, so it gets a tug. The fishing line wrapped around the propeller, right? Very very fast, and the speed of the RPMs. It fused with this thing called a cutlass bearing, which is the seal that connects the propeller to the engine room.
Hmm.
Right? It wore away. Just
Like the
that,
rod.
yeah. And this wore away. This incident wore away the seal. So I realized what had happened. I didn't know there was a seal. I didn't know the autonomy of the boat. But I spent basically the whole first afternoon then diving down and trying to cut off this line around the propeller, and it was so fused that the plastic was basically in a giant block. It was like it'd been forged in fire. Like it was like a giant block I had to kind of carve off with a knife. Um. Anyway, I got it off. Then, and the next sail, it was only we were going to Carriacou. We were going past a place called Kickham Jenny. It's an underwater volcano, and that
Hmm.
was seriously rough because there's a shelf there and it kicked up a massive sea. Got the shock of my life with the sea there, and my parents were scared to bits. But uh, I noticed the when we arrived in Carriacou that I opened the bilge, which was the bottom of the boat, and it was filled with water. Now it hadn't come up through the floorboards yet, but it was filled with water, and I was like, what the hell?" So I run the bilge pump, and I thought, okay, I thought the boat was a bit leaky, or maybe there was a hole or something. Um. Anyway, fast forward to we were going up the Grenadines, and oh god, there was so much stuff the other stuff that happened. along the way. I'm just thinking, but basically, at one point, the seal had completely broken. I think we were on our way to Beckway in the Grenadines, and literally we had water coming up through the floorboards. This is the first time we started sinking, by the way. This was the good time. Um, and managed. What I realized was when the motor was running, when that propeller was spinning, all there was water coming in through the shaft and filling
Hmm.
up the engine room and going into the bilge pump because the seal was broken. So basically, I got told in Beckway, but I got a guy to go down and look at these guys. They cleaned the bottom of the boat, and they told me about the seal. So before I thought it was a hole. Okay, so on the previous islands, I was going down diving and I was plugging holes, which are actually the runoff holes from the boat. They weren't actual holes. I thought they were holes because I thought there was a hole in the boat. So I found it was this seal, and there was nowhere on the island to get it fixed on Beckway or St. Vincent, the country of St. Vincent,
Hmm.
because they didn't have a boat yard. So basically, I'd have to risk going all the way to St. Lucia, which was 2 days sail. But the guy at the boatyard in Beckway said, "This boat is not seaworthy." Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't risk it, but I had to risk it. Um, but it gets worse, right? Um, so basically my plan was to every couple of hours run the bilge pump and just basically empty the boat of water. So it like just kept emptying the running the bilge pump, so it is spit out the water that was coming into the boat, and just try and sail as much as possible. This wasn't possible on the lee side of St. Lucia because the wind died and we had to run the motor. So we just kept running the bilge pump and hoping that it didn't fail on us. And it kept getting worse and worse. It went from basically we'd run the bilge pump, maybe 30 seconds, all the water would be gone, to like, a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. And we just keep spitting water nonstop for 3 minutes because we're taking on so much water. Then we hit in Lucia, should I say? And that's when
You
another.
made it.
No, no, we didn't. We didn't at all because that's when another tragedy befell. Was when ran aground. So it crashed the boat into rocks.
Whoa.
Yeah, and this was a completely separate fucking thing that happened. So what happened was we're coming in to get a mooring. This this is hilarious. This is not hilarious at all, but we're coming into a mooring, and the mooring was very close to the shore, and there was these guys trying to help us out. Um, these island boys who were on a small boat trying to help
Hmm.
us with the mooring, and I was coming up to the mooring, and they were like, "Okay," I put it in neutral, and they're like, "Slow down." So slow down. Okay, I'm gonna put it in reverse. Put the boat in reverse. We start speeding up, and I was like, "What the hell? What's going on?" And I thought maybe I was crazy or panicked in the moment. So I said, okay, I must be in forward, not reverse, because it's one side of the lever or the other, right? And I pushed it the opposite direction. We started speeding up even faster. And I'm like, oh no, this is definitely forward. This one, I was right the first time. And by the way, we're getting closer and closer to the shore. And I'm like, I'm really getting panicky. Everyone's starting yelling and screaming, whoa, whoa, whoa. And so I put it in reverse again, full throttle, started speeding up even more. And just before now, I look at my mom, I look at my dad, I said, grab onto something. We're gonna hit. And bang! The boat slid up into the rocks, smashed into him. Now, I'll tell you what happened after, but what had happened was this is a bit things that can go wrong about. There was a metal wire that we used to lock up the dinghy that my father had casually thrown in the locker, a locker, right? Now, in this locker, there is the battery, and there also is the lever, the basically the chain that connects the levers to the motor, right? So what had happened was the lever I was going back and forth with, the thing that connects to the gear shifter in the engine, that had been fried and caught fire because the metal cable that I put in, one side just happened to have touched off the battery, and the other side, one part of the cable also found its way to that cable. They're both metallic, and this caused electrical fire.
What are the chances?
Yeah, exactly. So the gear shifter cable wasn't working, so we are getting the revs and the power, but the gear shifter wasn't changing, so we are constantly going forward. Um, and this cable had caused me trouble like 2 weeks earlier when I started the boat. When I started the boat, we couldn't get that gear shifter working. But anyway, that's irrelevant. But and this is what caused us to slam into the boat. And I tell you, that was terror. That was absolute terror. Because the first thing you're thinking is, okay, well, I was already sinking, but are we sinking? Are we extra sinking? Are we sinking? Are we got two holes now? I didn't know what was happening. We're on the rocks. Like the boat wasn't. We're up on the rocks because we come up with some force. But
And this is
the,
like the southern part of
this is
St. Lucia.
the middle part of Saint Lucia. We're right
Okay.
by the Pitons, the famous Pitons in this small town called Soufrière.
Okay.
Um, and so everyone, the boat guys throw us a load of ropes. They get another boat to come who's close by, and these two speedboats trying to pull us out from the rocks. Um, they managed to get us free and pull us around to the mooring, tied up. Made sure we weren't sinking. The I opened up the bilge and the water level wasn't rising. So okay. Then the guys basically came on the boat and robbed us because they were saying, "Oh, you should pay, $1,000, $2,000 for a rescue. That's how much you should pay." And they basically went through our stuff and basically took all our money and left. um, it was not a nice experience, not a nice
Jeez.
introduction to Saint Lucia. Now, like, it wasn't a violent mugging or nothing. It was just like a very heated argument, and they were insisting, or we'll bring you to an ATM. And we just kind of gave them like 100, 200 butters. Like, here, listen, man, get lost. They were very aggressive. But anyway, they got lost. So from there, managed to get up to Rodney Bay, which was the kind of the main yachting hub. Got the boat taken out of the water. Got the seal fixed and got the bottom done. That was the first time. That was the first problem that.
And how did you even get the boat up the coast even more if it was like crashed into rocks?
Well, the thing is, I dived down, and because those boats they're so thick, they're 5 inches of fiberglass. What had happened was I was very lucky because what happened, it slid in between two rocks, so it kind of got wedged in. So when I
Mm,
lifted up the boat, it was like basically just a scratch on it. It was these kind of a little two scratches along the side, but there was no puncture point or there was no blunt force, and we were actually able to get it epoxied and fixed pretty handy because but if that had happened, there was of course the scrape dug out some fiberglass. But if that was on a modern Beneteau or a modern boat, which is 2 inches thick, it would have sank it for sure. But those are
mm.
so robust, that, you'd have to hit a goddamn iceberg to sink those classic plastics. But it was much worse though the second time we started sinking. So that was off the coast of Guadaloupe. uh, the the shaft
Wait,
the
wait, and that's way forward. So
oh
you're
yeah,
in St. Lucia. I'm
yeah,
looking at a map right now. So you got the
yeah,
thing repaired. You made it to Martinique, and then you made it to Dominica, and then on to Guadeloupe.
yeah. So it was all that was going pretty. That was a pretty good period because we were in Carnival in Martinique, so that was blast. Um, yeah, but Martinique was a good time because it was just a decent. And then we didn't stop. I didn't stop in Dominica till the way back down, basically, because I kind of did a loop. Um, I kind of yeah. So to geography wise, I started in Grenada at the bottom, went all the way up to Saint Martin on the top, and then I ended the boat. The boat ended up back down in Guadeloupe, and I kind of flew to Dominica for the end of the trip. But anyway, it's a different
Hmm.
skipping ahead. But so and it was we had some good sailing days. We hit some squalls. I think from Saint Lucia to Martinique, which is just really really bad weather. It was like a cloud of just a giant, imagine a grey wall coming towards you, and just got pummeled and ripped the mainsail. Um, so basically I had to take the mainsail down. Oh, sorry. Before all this, by the way, also what happened in Beckway, this is way back in St. Grenadines. The my front sail ripped in half because it got caught in the mast, so I had to replace the front sail. And then on that trip, the mainsail ripped, so I had to replace the mainsail. This is all very expensive, by the way. This is the most expensive trip of my life. Getting it taken out of the water, uh, doing all that work on the and all the sails. Oh my god! Thank God.
Is it typically like cheap to repair a boat and stuff in these Caribbean islands, or is it more expensive than it would have been in Europe?
It's sama sama. I think it's same. It's in a lot of instances it's actually more expensive. I think labor is a bit cheaper, but not by much, to be honest. In fact, a lot of like marinas are much more expensive in the Caribbean.
Like for the docking and stuff?
Yeah, because there's not a lot of infrastructure. So, like for example, between Grenada and St. Lucia, like the whole island, even though St. Vincent and the Grenadines is the most popular place in the world to sail, there's actually no place to take your boat out there. There's no facilities. Oh, I think there is a small little place in St. Vincent, but it has a really bad reputation. And there's also a lot of crime on St. Vincent and that kind of thing. But
Okay.
anyway, so apart from all the sails ripping and all that kind of thing, Guadaloupe, the worst was definitely the worst I experienced was because we hit some really really bad weather, and what I hear my mom from down this was their last bit of they got the worst of it because they were going home from Guadeloupe when I was getting new crew. And my brother was with me. One of my brothers also was there for St. Vincent and the Grenadines. He was there for a few incidents as well, which I have to go back to. But actually, I'll go back to it now. Sorry if I'm just skipping around, but I
That's
keep
fine.
remembering bad things that happen. Another thing that almost happened was when I mentioned about the fishing line, right?
Hmm.
Getting caught in the propeller. Well, because I was such a newbie, right? Well, one time we were in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We were in a place called Carrick, or what's it called? I can't remember the island now. It's what's it called? Just 1 second, I'll get it up here now. It is called Canoan,
Hmm.
and going to grab a mooring ball. Um, and we had a line in the water, a rope in the water, just it had gotten loose. It jammed up the propeller, killed the engine. All right, so we had no engine, and the sails were down, and we're right by the coast, and we started to drift towards the coast. I was like, this is the first time that the threat of running aground happened. Because you're just not as aware as you should be when you first started sailing. You don't realize how dangerous a rope in the water can be. So we started to drift towards. The weather was a bit rough as well. The worst, one of the worst anchorages we stayed in. So we're getting pushed towards land. I was like, oh my god, we're going to run aground because we've no control of the boat whatsoever. And basically, what I had to do was I grabbed the longest rope I could, and I screamed at my brother and my dad. It's like, tie this to somewhere in the boat. And I jumped in the water. I swam as hard as I could to the nearest mooring ball, and I swear to God, it was a body length away. The rope ran out. I couldn't reach it to tie it and to secure the boat. And it was drifting. And what they did was I screamed over, like, tie the rope to another rope. So they were fumbling and fumbling, getting closer to the shore. They managed to tie it, and they just gave me just enough rope to wrap around the other side of the mooring ball. I tied a knot in it, and it just tugged on it, like I'd say 10 seconds later. So it stopped the boat running aground, and then we were able to pull the boat back to the mooring ball. So that was just another little tiny thing that happened, but but it potentially
Okay.
horribly
Ropes in the
dangerous.
water. Got it.
But anyway, off Guadeloupe, the worst was the seal on the inside of the boat failed. So this is a huge seal. It's called a stuffing box, um, and this is inside the engine room. And because it was such an old piece of equipment, it should have been replaced years ago, and I didn't even know what a stuffing box was. And listen, when this thing failed, there was a deluge of water, like so much water coming into the boat that pumping it out with the bilge pump, you couldn't pump it out. So at the rate you needed to stop the boat from sinking. And I didn't realize this had happened. So this had popped. The engine room was filling up the bilge, and I'm there sailing the ship with my dad outside, and my mom goes, Mark, there's water on the floor. There's loads of water in the floor. Is that normal? And I look down and I see this. The water was coming up through the floorboard, sinking the ship. And we're in this big heavy weather, getting pummeled by waves. And I see this water coming up through the floorboards. I don't think I've ever been as scared in my life. I thought we're done for. Um, we were about, I would say, an hour or two from the nearest piece of land in Guadaloupe, nowhere near a bay. But I thought, worst comes to worst, we could get it into. I ran down. I said, Dad, point it towards land, because if we can somehow bail enough water out of here, and an hour, even if we run aground into land, at least we can get to shallow water that we can bail or jump out of the boat or something. I don't know. Just get towards the land, or hit something. I don't care, but just get to something we can, some sort of land. And I open up the engine room and I see this torrent of water coming in. And it was just, I froze. It was just terror. So uh, and this is where it gets worse. I turn on the bilge pump so it can start to empty the water, and the bilge pump failed. It had worked the whole trip, and at this point, the bilge pump failed.
And the bilge pump is just a
It's
water pump for the
yeah,
engine room, or
yeah, no, it's in the bottom of the boat, and it bails water. So when water
okay.
comes into the boat, it bails it out. So it's kind of like a mandatory thing after the boat. And also there's a backup called a manual bilge pump, which is a pump that you use with your hand. That failed. I never tested it. And obviously the pipe that led to the exterior of the boat, there was obviously a valve somewhere that the pipe it wasn't working basically. It wasn't bailing water. So the bilge pump failed, the manual bilge pump failed, and we're taking on water so fast. The boat, I'd say, maybe 30 minutes before we sank it.
Mhm.
Now, we did have a dinghy on top of the boat. So worst case, we could have jumped to the dinghy and an SOS from an EPIRB. But you're not thinking of that. You're thinking, and the thing is, the waves are so big that even if we had gotten the dinghy, we would have been smashed. Like we would have our bodies would have ended up with the water. It would have been just a bad time, potentially deadly. I'm not going to lie, potentially deadly. And thank the Lord, or whatever your God is, that we were running the motor, and we were motor sailing, because we were going against the wind, and we needed to we needed an extra push to get to Guadaloupe, and we wanted to get through the bad weather. And when the first thing I thought was like, okay, I'm going to turn off the engine. Turn off the engine, because what if the same thing happened if the propeller stops running? Maybe it'll reduce the water flow like it did previously when the seal broke from the outside. And when I stopped the engine, the deluge turned into just like a stream, like a manageable stream of water, where I knew that I could get a bucket and bail water quicker than the water was coming in at that point.
Mhm.
So started getting and the thing was, there was I had a bit of an oil leak from the engine. So there was oil mixed with the water. And so it was making all the boats slipping all over the place, trying to organize things. So I got like a cooking pan. I started bailing water into the fridge, into the sink, and pumping it out. Started pumping out as quick as I could, buckets, everything. And I said, listen, the only way this is going to work is if I get my dad to do it, and does it to the toilet. He basically starts bailing water into the toilet, pumping it out, and I sail to the nearest safety point. And then it was basically like that's what we did for 2 hours. We were 2 hours. I was sailing up on top, and my dad was bailing water, and managed to stop, like basically get the water level slowly down. And we couldn't run the motor, because the motor was causing too much water to come in. So I had to basically go into an anchorage under sail with absolutely no motor power, and maneuver the boat to anchor under sail, which is a very, very difficult maneuver for anyone who knows how to sail. When you don't have a motor and you have to come into an anchorage to anchor with sail, it's dangerous and extremely difficult. Never done it before, but managed to pull it off. Managed to pull it off in the main city of Guadaloupe, in Puerto Prete. And that was their last sail that they did with me. It was a bad way to end it for them. But they basically had to fly home. And when they left, I
Was
thought,
that always their intended departure point, or were they just like enough?
no, they had my brother had it. My brother was supposed to go for 2 weeks. He just had the experience going to the St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm done." uh, he didn't go to St. Lucia. He might have gone to St. Lucia, but I don't think he was loving it because the conditions were just too bad. My brother had never sailed before. I have two brothers. This is my second one, and he kind of was like, "What the hell is going on here?" He didn't expect the weather to be as bad, and the sleeping conditions were terrible because it was a lot of wind and chop, and so he could never sleep, and it was too hot, and he was like, "I'm not loving this. I'm gonna skip the St. Lucia bit." So he headed back after a week. But I said it's not. I can understand why he did it. Like he wasn't loving it. But he said he wasn't sleeping. Anyway, um, but I think he had other reasons to go home. It wasn't just that. Anyway, it was. They had basically planned to do a month, and as far as up as they got, they would fly home because I didn't know if they could end. At the start, I thought they'd be flying home from Grenada because we couldn't get the boat started, and I thought the trip then when we had the first break seal in St. Vincent, I thought we'd be going home then because the guy told me don't sail, it's not seaworthy. Then we crashed in St. Lucia. I thought, hey, we're definitely going home now. But then they ripped both the sails. But we got to Guadaloupe anyway, and they got me up pretty high. Fair play to them, and they were great. Like my mom, I was really surprised with her. She seriously brave woman. I don't know any other woman who would have tolerated those conditions and stayed on board the ship. So fair play to her. And my dad was incredible as well. It was the first time I ever saw my dad panicky or where he was always a very calm dude, but he was completely out of his depth. I've never seen him be like that. They both had it. They're both trauma. They left them both traumatized. But as they say, it was the biggest adventure of life, and they actually look back on the whole thing really, really fondly because of all the. Because I'm not telling you all the bad things, but there was so much incredible moments, like the sunsets, the the rum punches on the beach, these beautiful locations, the people we met. Oh my god, it was rich with just incredible experiences. I might have, if I had left it there, and because I thought it was definitely ending in Guadalupe. After that one, I thought it was definitely flying home. Actually, I put it up for sale after that incident with the stuffing box. I was done. I put it up for
Mhm.
sale at that point. Managed to get it fixed in the end, but and I continued my journey. Um, but I was done at that point. My soul was wrecked, tattered, but there was so much worse to come. Uh, oh god, it was worse. Believe it or not, there was worse that came afterwards. But sinking wise, I think maybe not as bad as sinking, but although there was one point where it's definitely going to end. Anyway, sorry, I'm skipping ahead. I was just so much to tell. I have so much to tell. This is the first time I'm telling all these stories.
So when you're entering all these countries, is it the same as entering in an airport where like there's a customs officer at the port, or do you have when you I guess pull up in a new country, do you have to then get onto land and report to some sort of immigrations office, or how do you
Bingo.
like formally enter the country?
Yeah. So basically, I may or may not have entered a few countries illegally because it was during COVID and I didn't want to fucking get tests or. I did a lot of dodgy stuff on the trip, which I shouldn't go into detail on this podcast. But it was a bit of hanky panky going on. I could tell. I wouldn't tell the. I'm not going to incriminate myself,
No,
but
that's fine. But how would it normally work?
yeah, basically, yeah, you could. We only got checked. We only got boarded by customs once on the whole trip, and that was in. You could. I can see why drug smugglers use boats because you can just go from country to country and not check in anywhere. It's so easy. Like even around Europe and stuff, you can just go from port to port and never talk to anybody. There's no checks, but what you're supposed to do is you arrive, you report to customs and immigration, and yeah, that's the kind of procedure. And it was very complicated with the COVID stuff. But
Mhm.
let's just say I found ways around that. I'm good at Photoshop.
Is
But
there typically like a Coast Guard immigration, or you have to go to like the real one?
there's usually two. There's customs and then there's immigration. So there's
Okay.
usually two offices. Customs is where you deal with both. It's like an office you go into. Usually you have to radio them beforehand, but in the Caribbean, no one answers the radio. So you just kind of show up and it's all very casual.
Have you
Um,
learned how to work the radio and do the commands and all that?
No, you don't really have to know much about it. It's like you just say your boat over. You learn the basics of a mayday, but there's nothing. You know what's really cool about boats? There's so much. I mean, it's a whole different world, man. It really is. They have this thing called a cruiser's net. So like you wake up in Grenada at 7:30 every morning, you turn on the cruiser's net, and it's like the internet before the internet. So it's like, good morning, cruisers. Today is this date, and the weather's going to be like this. Now, next is social events. Any social events out there? And then the bars will call in and they'll be like, yes, today we're doing Taco Tuesdays or whatever. There's an open mic at this place. And then,
That's
right,
awesome.
next is Treasure of the Bilge. And different boats will like say what they're selling from the boat, or they welcome new arrivals, departures. And it's like a whole network that happens in the morning
That's awesome. I
it's
really
so
want to come
cool.
back to this after we finish the mishaps. I want to come back to the
The fun, cool parts.
how boating is like a whole new world.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
but
It's so
but
cool.
yeah, yeah. If you want to keep going, tell us
I get the tragedy
how the
over.
rest of it. Yeah, sure.
I get to the good parts. Yeah. So anyway, Guadaloupe, I put out on Instagram and Twitter stuff. I needed crew. It was actually really cool about having the. Obviously, my reputation is not what it used to be because I'm not very active anymore. But I still was able to catch a few crew members just by putting it out on social media. Had a guy fly down from New York. Hunter, his name is. Within like 2 days, this kind of is kind of a wealthy chap, older player type of dude. Flew down. He said he knew a bit about sailing, not as much as he said, but which proved I don't know. I love the guy, but let's just say he ended up having a few personal problems on the way with dealing with alcoholism. He'd given up alcohol he was in Betty Ford clinic for a while, and I was a bad influence, and this led to a series of disasters on the boat. Um, First being, so first of all, we managed to get up from Guadalupe to Antigua. Now that trip was the worst waves that I'd experienced on the trip. This is where we're hitting the 3 meter waves.
Hmm.
He was a very affluent dude. Um, when he told me his sailing experience, he basically spent like a week on a catamaran with his rich buddies, right? Uh, he was not expecting to get smashed by the Atlantic in this little shitty old 32 footer boat. So he was kind of left shooken after this passage that we did. And during this passage, we befell a disaster. Another disaster, of course, a different type of one, but a very nasty one, which was we hit the squall. So there's a massive this grey wall coming towards us. As that's how you know a squall's coming. So it's like, okay, reduce sail, we're gonna get smashed. We got smashed, and it got smashed hard. So much so that I look up, and the basic, what do you call them? I can't remember the name of them. But the things that the little things that connect the mainsail to the mast. There's I don't know why I can't remember the name of them, but
Okay.
these little clips, basically these plastic clips. They're quite strong, but I noticed one snap from the force of the wind, and we're keeling, we're right over at the side. Even with reduced sail, we're getting it's just too much wind. Snap, another one snaps. I'm like, oh god, and they weren't together, but there's one up and one down. Snap, another one, and this one is right beside the other one. Snapped, and I look up and I said, oh good god, if one snaps either side of though, because we had two snapped in a row, the sail's gone. And as quickly as I had that thought, I said, I told Hunter, I said, grab the steering wheel, and literally as I was just getting up as a cockpin, snap, lost the mainsail into the ocean.
Like the
And
mast too, or just the sail?
no, just the sail. So I jump up, and now the bottom bit of the sail is still connected to the boom, which is it's the bottom part of the kind of the mast, I guess you could call it. It holds down the mainsail, but it flew, the whole mainsail went into the ocean, and I dive across, and in all these waves, getting pummeled by just spray and stuff, I pull in the sail from the ocean, managed to save it, and we had to basically it took a lot longer than we expected, but we spent it was a long day sail. I think like 14 hours or maybe 13 hours, but we had to just sail on the front sail then, Uh, that was kind of a nasty experience. But the so anyway, he was supposed to join me up to St. Martin, but after that trip, he was done. He was done for that passage. He helped me go around the island to the next stop. But what happened was after that sail, he needed a beer. He said, "Well, I offered it to him in fairness," but then he tells me about the whole doesn't drink thing, and I said, "Why don't you drink?" He said, "Well, I kind of spiral out of control when I drink." And it goes on for days. And I said, okay, maybe I shouldn't give him that beer. And so Hunter, if you listen, I'm sorry I'm telling this story, but it's hilarious. It's not hilarious for you, but but anyway, he starts the next day. We're walking around a place called English Harbour in Antigua. Lovely place,
Mhm.
beautiful place.
Mhm.
And just walk around the next day after that beer, and he goes and he goes in the pharmacy, comes back. Oh, breakfast beers on the street. I'm like, okay, all right, breakfast beers, why not? And he these breakfast beers last all day. He's drinking, drinking, drinking now. He's drinking nonstop. So come say we're sailing around to the other side of the island to get ready to cross to Saint Kitts and Nevis, a place called Jolly Harbour.
Mhm.
Now this this sail caused another series of unfortunate events. So I guess he was drinking early. I didn't know this, but I asked him to pull up the anchor. And when he pulled up the anchor smashed off this piece of metal up the front of the boat, which basically feeds in the rope for the front sail. Okay. I didn't know this had happened, but it misaligned it, right? So we're sailing around. It was a pretty handy sail until we get to the capital, St. John's. We're about 40 minutes an hour out. And I tried to bring in the front sail, but because the feeder line is not working because the metal is misaligned, it's not coming in. I can't pull in the front sail. So I'm like, oh my god, crap! And it was windy enough, so I realized I have to roll it up manually by hand. So I listen, man, take control of the boat because we're in a narrow channel with a shipping lane, So you need to concentrate, take control of the boat, try and get us in as far as you can. I'm going to try to roll this up by hand. I should mention, by the way, that in the previous harbor we got new clips for the mainsail, so we had the mainsail reattached, right? Um, we had to go all over the island to different places that would find these old clips because these clips were ancient because the boat was so old. So we just had just enough clips for the mainsail, literally just enough, and some of them were very old and worn down, which causes problems later. But I'll get into that. Um, anyway, so I'm trying to roll up this front sail by hand, and it's extremely difficult. It takes me 40 minutes. My forearms are burning trying to do this because the wind is pushing against the sail, and I'm fighting the wind. It was extremely excruciating. And after about 30, 40 minutes, I noticed that we've gone backwards. We're nowhere near the sail. We're out in the sea again. I'm like, what the hell, man? What are you doing? And I come back to him, and I was like, "Are you seasick?" I thought he had COVID because he was looking weird, and I'm like, "Are you okay?" He's like, "Yeah, yeah, I'm fine." So what are you doing? And I looked at the GPS. We had zigzagged all over the place. We had just gone around in circles, and it was all over the place. And I go downstairs, and I see this nearly finished bottle of rum. So he had bought a bottle of rum in the morning, and he was drinking the whole time, down a fucking bottle of rum.
True sailor.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So this is what causes mess. And anyway, got into there. He was done. He. The next day, he ordered a bottle of wine for breakfast, and by lunchtime, I found him buying fucking coke. And he was doing coke on the ship by lunchtime. So he he spiraled completely out of control, uh, and he realized it himself. So he basically had to check himself into a hotel and book a flight home and sort his life out. Because I think I think he was married as well. Uh, so he just kind of he was now listen. We had great times. I had great times with this guy, but he obviously had an issue with that. He had to fly home, and on the docks there was this young German guy who was looking for a ship to sail up north. He was trying to get to Dominican Republic. And there's a whole network, by the way, of boat hitchhikers on all these ports.
Let's definitely come back to that.
Yeah, no, it's very cool. And this guy had hitched across the Atlantic because apparently they all meet up in Portugal, and there's this kind of network that happens in the Grand Canaries, Portugal, and Cape Verde of all these boats and young sailors that all kind of there's a big network of hitching lifts and they organize payments and all. It's a very interesting world. But so this guy's named Moritz. Shout out Moritz if you're listening. Cool guy.
And this is in St. John's, Antigua?
Yes, this is in St. John's.
Okay.
Jolly Harbour. Sorry, Jolly Harbour. It's close to St. John's.
Okay.
Yeah, so he was my new crew member. And this is when, not the final thing that happened that was terrible, but we're getting close to the end. It's, actually, no, wait, there's a lot more, goddamn. Sorry, I know this is getting a bit long-winded and stuff, but it's exciting stuff. So anyway, we crossed the St. Kitts and Nevis. Thought it was a grand day. Thought it was fine. Now, two new issues that caused major issues. One, I had a really bad oil leak. I developed a really, really bad motor oil leak in the engine. The engine doesn't work without motor oil. This thing got so bad that it was going through about a quart of oil every half an hour. That's how bad it developed. But at this point, it was maybe a quart every 2 hours of the motor running, which is terrible. It was a bad oil leak. And it had gotten really bad at this point, where it was hard to ignore because I had to buy like 8-10 quarts just for a trip. And so I couldn't, I had to use the motor very sparingly. Now, you know the way I was telling you that I had to roll up the front sail by hand? Mm-hmm. Okay. What I didn't know how rigging works. What I didn't realize that when I did that, I had actually unscrewed the metal cable that connected the top, the sail from the top of the mast to the front of the boat. The thing that held the actual cable that held the whole sail up. So I didn't realize this had happened, right? So we're about three. Oh god, I actually want to say I don't know. I can't tell you. I think it was about 5 hours sail. It ended up being 5 hours from St. Kitts and Nevis. So sailing the whole day. Thought it was grand. We're going downwind. Great all day. And out of nowhere, there's a gust of wind. Bang! The whole front sail of the boat just gets taken away. The cable snapped. The kind of the metal rod that you slide the front sail into, it snapped in 3 places. The cable snapped, and the whole thing fell into the ocean. I lost the forestay.
Jeez.
Yeah. And the forestay supports the mast. If you lose the forestay, the backstay is useless. Or say, if you lose the forestay, you lose support of the mast. So, managed to. By the way, I got retrieved it from the ocean because it was still it's still connected at the top to the top of the mast. So we got all the bits of the rods and the sail in. It was very panicky. The thing is, Moritz was like, "Oh my god, what is happening?" But believe it or not, I actually wasn't that panicked about it. I was like, "Oh crap," because so much stuff had happened to me at this point. I was like, "Oh god, it's just another day sailing." So I just got to work and got it in and pulled it in. I was actually it was panicky, but I was actually kind of calm about it because, like, listen, I've dealt with so much stuff sinking and stuff. This is minor. But then I realized, oh god, that this supports the mast. What if the mast goes? Now, thankfully, we're going downwind. So if you can imagine, the wind and the front sail was pushing the mast forward, but we still had the backstay. So we had tension on the backstay. So the backstay was keeping the sail up, the mast up. If we had been going upwind, the mast would have snapped because we'd have nothing supporting it basically. So
okay.
we're down to a mainsail and we're 5 hours away. It's starting to get dark because we'd lost sail power. We're slowed down, and I realized, okay, I have to use the engine. Beep 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 beep. After half an hour, we're out of engine oil. I have a little tiny bit of engine oil that I know would be good for around 15, 20 minutes of engine time. So we were forced to we had to find the nearest possible point we could sail into and just use the last 15 minutes to anchor with the motor, right? So we're there for 5 hours just staring at the mast, hoping it doesn't break, and then snap. Those replacements things we got, snap. Two snaps.
Hmm.
Now we're looking at losing the mainsail. So no mainsail, no motor oil to run the engine, no front sail. Absolute zero control of the boat, right?
Just a rudder.
Just smash into Nevis eventually. Now, so we were there for 5 hours just staring at that goddamn mainsail, looking at those clips, praying to whatever god we had that no more snaps, because they weren't both together. The two snaps, they're one at the top and one at the bottom. Just praying like, do not snap. It was such a tense 5 hours. Eventually, actually, we got around the corner and just had enough motor oil to kind of come into this little bay that no one else was anchored in, and we are in the dark at this point. And I was kind of just going on GPS. When we anchored down, when I dove down the next day, we were, I'd say, not half a meter from the ground. We'd gone in so shallow that oh God, another 10, 20 meters, we would have ran aground. Oh, anyway, I should mention that we had intended to go to St. Martin, not St. Kitts, on this journey, but we changed plans halfway through because of this issue. So we were in St. Kitts now illegally because you needed a COVID test. You didn't need it for St. Martin's. We didn't have any COVID test. So we were effectively stowaways there for a week. And we had to, listen, we got sore in the end. I don't want to incriminate myself too much, but it was a lot of, it was dicey. Let's just say it was dicey. Anyway. Oh, okay. God, I need a break from all this. Well, let's. I'll tell you about the next parts of the trip because I need to break
Okay.
up all this because this is heavy for me. Even going back to this, there's a lot more that happened, but we're about three
Just
quarters of the way
reliving
through.
it in your head.
Yeah, no, because it's a bit dramatic. Like I want to get into something a bit lighter because I feel like it's. Let's. I'll go on to. I'll stop and say Martin. So, um, got some repairs done anyway. Managed to find clips and went up to Statia, which is amazing, by the way. This island, Statia, is a Dutch colony. I got to St. Martin, and that's where Maritz left and my other brother, joined. And that's a new series of unfortunate events.
And this would be
um,
your other brother?
yeah, my other brother, and that was kind of like the last stint. We went to Guadaloupe. We had to go back to Nevis, then Montserrat, and Guadaloupe. But there's a lot of things that happened on that journey as well that were, oh God, really really dicey as well. Totally different new set of problems. But
All
we'll go
right,
to
so
something
I'll
lighter
mix
for
it up
time. We
for
need
you.
to pause. We need to pause. Jesus.
We need a pause. Yeah. So how? Let you take a breath. How many new countries did you tick off on this trip?
So the two awkward ones, Barbados and Trinidad, that were kind of not on the route. I'd visited Barbados when I'd bought the boat initially, like back last September.
Hmm.
Kind of just to get it. I really liked Barbados, really cool place. Best nightlife in the region. Cool beaches, very flat though. And then also before I went to Grenada on this trip, I stopped off in Trinidad, and kind
Had
of,
some fun.
yeah, exactly. I met a reader there as well. He contacted me on Instagram or his Twitter, actually. He reached out to me. Really, really cool guy. Kind of like he's a kind of he's Trinidadian, but he's like blue eyes but dreadlocks. So, and he's a model, I believe. So he showed me like clubs and stuff. He was a perfect host. Really cool guy. But yeah, and I had a blast in Trinidad. That was a real nice kind of way to start things.
So,
Um,
question for you. So, why
To
start
answer your
in
question,
Grenada?
eight countries. That's to answer your
Eight
question.
countries.
Yeah, eight
Okay,
countries. Yeah,
eight countries. That's nice. And so you started in Grenada, which is kind of like the southernmost of
the
that
Antilles.
line
Yeah,
of Lesser Antilles countries.
yeah.
Was there a particular reason that you started kind of at the south going north versus north south? Was that like a question of the winds and the direction?
It was a question of where I could buy the boat. I mean, there's two options. There's a lot of boats in St. Martin's, up the right up the north, and also the British Virgin Islands.
Hmm.
But they're in the hurricane belt. Where the further south you get, there's no hurricane. So Grenada is the safest. Grenada and Trinidad is like the two safest place in the
Hmm.
Caribbean to keep your boat.
Hmm. Makes sense.
So there's a big boating community there. It was easier to find. Like Grenada is amazing. You have most people. Grenada is probably my favorite country in the region. Most of the people there on sailboats, they just don't move. They just park up there and they end up staying there for years. And they just kind of there's such a cool boating scene there. Like you have open mics and they all bring their saxophones and stuff. They have different bars. You have all the old sailors that go jamming. I don't know if you saw my video. My boat was right beside this abandoned island or this uninhabited island called Hog Island. Had a beach bar there,
Yep.
barbecue, rastas. You just take your dinghy there. It's just so cool. Like Grenada's just, I love it. So they just stay there. So it's a big hub, Grenada. That's where I found the boat, and it was perfect because I want to start either north or south. Now the disadvantage was like my boat came with a free mooring as well, so I didn't have to pay for storage. I
What
would
does
have
that
liked.
mean? A mooring? Is a mooring like a parking spot or?
Yeah, it's like a ball and it's connected to chains and a sand screw. Now you get them replaced every years, but it basically is something you tie your boat onto, and it's kind of like a parking space.
Okay,
And
so is it? It's the mooring is on land,
no,
and
it's
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 like
it's not. It's that you're thinking of. There's different types of mooring. You can call a mooring like a mooring at a marina is still. It's kind of the different ones. There's a ball mooring which is out in open ocean. Mine was out in ocean. All the boats
okay,
there are out in ocean. It wasn't in a marina. So marinas usually have to pay for.
okay, okay. So it's like a parking spot in the
In the
ocean, but
ocean,
like in a bay, so it's kind of
protected bay.
protected.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
protected bay.
and people typically pay like like an annual fee for the moorings.
There, some places yes, but a lot of it's free for all. To be honest, especially in the Caribbean, you just put
Okay,
down
so
your
you
own
only
mooring.
pay if you're like really like on a dock, but
Yeah,
if you're just putting the anchor down, I guess, in a mooring,
anchoring.
it's
No,
typically free.
anchoring is different. So anchoring is free everywhere usually.
Okay.
You just put down your anchor anywhere, but it's not secure. Moorings are much more secure because they're really robust chains and stuff. And
Hmm.
a lot of enterprising locals will put down moorings in popular spots, and then you pay 20, 30 a night, $20, 30 a night to use the mooring. And sometimes some places the moorings are actually mandatory, like in some of the French islands and stuff like that. I rarely used marinas. There's not as much in the Caribbean. I think I used marina maybe twice. Yeah, twice, three times, maybe twice even.
Okay.
Yeah, 3 times. Sorry, three. Anyway, irrelevant. Mostly anchoring, followed by mooring boys.
Okay. Gotcha. And let's talk a bit about like this whole different world of boating and yachting, and I guess the community around it and the things you learn, and just how I guess I don't know, being on the water and being in a boat, it's just a very different dynamic or way to go through life versus going on land. You're talking a bit about, the, I guess the morning radio. So like, what is like the range on those radios? Is it just kind of everyone in a marina or in a little area?
No, they're so these VHF radios. There's different channels. I think the range on them is pretty big. I mean, people use these out in open ocean. Actually, I'm gonna just quick. It says you can about. I'm just looking at the how far does it go? 20 kilometers. You're looking at range.
Okay. So kind
Um,
of like covering like if you're on one of
the
these
area,
islands are pretty small. It could potentially
the
reach to
whole
the other
island.
side of the island.
Yeah. So you'll have a Grenada. You'll have different islands will have their own cruiser nets. They're called.
Hmm.
And also, there's
Cruising net.
Facebook groups. Every island has a Facebook group, and they're amazing. The Facebook groups. People are so helpful. I'll tell you something now. The nicest people I've ever met in my life are sailors. They're the most helpful, kind, happy people I've ever met. The people will just come over to your boat and help you out if you have an issue. They're always willing to help. You go to the marina bars if you want to see how old the happiest like older people in your life, just go to a marina bar. They're they're all really happy people. I was the youngest sailor by miles everywhere I went,
Really?
and I'm 36. Yeah, everyone else is much older.
Why do you
I
think that
was a
is?
baby because it's something retired people do. Like it's not because I was in a little crappy boat. Most of these people are in. You know, there's they're in 100 grand to half a million boats, catamarans and nice 40, 50 footers. They did this for retirement. Most of them are retired. This is a kind of like been their dream. It's couples usually.
Hmm.
So it's a lot of older couples. Actually, kind of, yeah,
Go
go
ahead.
on.
Go ahead. Go
And
ahead.
the stories you hear at marinas, wow. I could, like, you think my stories are good. I could tell, after I finish up my stories, I'll tell you some of the stories that I heard from other sailors, and really just, I mean, it really, people have this idea of sailing as kind of this leisurely thing that's kind of, they think of like it's sort of their vision of a utopian paradise, the lifestyle, but it's remarkably dangerous, and very, very adventurous. It's. I have been to war zones dressed as Mexican pirates, Somalia, Syria, Cote d'Ivoire, as I've explained before. Honestly, sailing is the most adventurous thing I've ever done. It's you're really out there on your own. You're completely self-sufficient. You have to figure things out. There was things I had to figure out on the fly, like rigging, and as you'll see later on, about engines in the middle of the ocean in bad weather, that there's no one coming to help you.
Hmm.
Um, Especially in the
That's one of the
Caribbean.
things that scares me the most because I've never even owned a car, and I'm like, I would have no idea how to tinker with a motor.
Well, I had a manual. They come with manuals, and I
There
had
you
to.
go.
Yeah, I learned a lot. Jeez, because I know nothing about motors. I had to learn the hard way. Um, but
So tell me some other ways that it's like a whole different world.
Okay, so even just the dinghy culture, like your typical night out, you get ready on the boat. Um, I had a fridge there. Usually you have a bottle of rum, have a few warm up brews. You shave you put on some music. Portable speaker, maybe smoke something because you're on the islands. It's cheap, right? So you smoke a drink and you're getting all geared up. Then you're getting on the dinghy, which is kind of funny because it's like pitch black. You have these little headlights. You
Hmm.
always go out with your little headlights, and you're kind of, it could be just a minute to the nearest place to tie your dinghy, or it could be 15 minutes. It could be very long distances to the nearest point where you can tie your dinghy to where the restaurants and bars are, depending on
Hmm.
where you anchor and stuff. Um, so it's kind of it's a weird thing, like going out and getting on these dinghies, and then you go to all these marina bars, and they've all these, it's all sailors, and there's all these different events and stuff. It's kind of a very unique thing, and just the whole thing about going out and being completely drunk. Everyone is, by the way, sailors are all alcoholics. They're drinking every single night. Like every single night is a holiday when you're a sailor. Like there's something going on all the time, and then everyone gets on. These old people, they get on completely hammered to their dinghies, and they just go back to the boats. And getting on the boat can be very difficult at nighttime. If it's choppy, the boat could be banging side to side, and you kind of like my mom and my dad fell into the water trying to getting on and off dinghies. Drunk, or even if sometimes you have to just beach the dinghy, so you have to like kind
Hmm.
of ride up on the beach, jump out of the water, pull up the dinghy, and then there's waves trying to launch it back out into the sea. You can get absolutely drowned. You always have like a waterproof bag. A lot can go wrong, and sadly, to illustrate this point, my very first bar, I went to Rogers Beach Bar, Hog Island. I met this guy called Richard. He's an 80-year-old English guy. He'd crossed the Atlantic 5 times, and 2 weeks later, his body was found in that exact bay because he got in the dinghy drunk. They don't know what happened to him. I guess he tried to board his boat, maybe hit his head or something like that, and his body was found. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff happens. Um, but there's no drink driving police when you're out in the ocean. Yeah, it's just a different world.
Hmm.
Yeah, and sleeping. The rocking side to side. It's not for everybody. I find it quite nice, but sometimes if it's bad, you just can't sleep. It's impossible. Um,
Really?
but you'll notice that your rhythms change. Like you end up waking up at 6 or 7 in the morning, just becomes normal because you work with the sun, and because you have so
Hmm.
much sun exposure during the day, you get so tired at nighttime. Like you just collapse into the deepest sleep you possibly. And you always have a few drinks on you as well, so you get the big heavy 9 hour sleeps where you don't know what's going on. Oh, and actually, speaking about not what's going on, I'll tell you another little story that I missed in Guadaloupe, in the capital Basque here. a notoriously bad anchorage. That it's where the boat actually ended up when I looped back when I sold it. But me and Hunter, this guy Hunter, we are absolutely smashed drunk. The anchor is a bad anchorage because it's all weedy, so the anchor didn't hold. So the anchor at one point lost during the night. Storm, lashing rain, just piling down the rain, and the anchor came loose during the night. We had no idea, and this is very close to shore. And I wake up around 3 o'clock to the biggest bang, slam into something that's and hard, and it was the biggest boom right by my head. Fuck, Jesus Christ, the panic. I get up, what the fuck? Lash of rain, I go outside, I slammed into another boat. So, and it's like pouring rain, and we're all panicking and stuff like this, and the boats are kind of loose in the anchorage, and I just see this naked old French guy, this 6-year-old with his dick hanging out and everything, just like comes up, and I think he was drunk as well, and he's just staring at me. We're both staring at each other like I'm in my underwear, lashing rain, and he just goes, I was like, "Parlez-vous anglais?" And he just goes, "Go away!" So we, in the middle of the rain, we had to like pull up the anchor. We had to find some spot, and we had to like re-anchor. It can pitch black. Just and I couldn't even see where the shoreline was. I didn't know how deep. I had to just go on the depth sounder basically to make sure we were deep enough so we didn't go. Oh god! But this happened to me 3 times where the anchor broke loose while I was asleep and caused all sorts of incidents. But anyway, that was one of them. That was the
Jeez,
worst
because it
one.
looks like Basse-Terre is like pretty much open with no
Oh, it's
coverage.
terrible. It's the worst. That was the worst anchorage I stayed at, and there, it's famously everybody people kind of have to stop there because of where it is, but everyone avoids it if they can, and it's I hate that town. Oh, God, it's my least favorite place in the whole Caribbean. It's a provincial capital, so it's capital of Guadaloupe, but it's only the admin capital. The actual main city is Port-au-Prince, which is pretty cool. But this place doesn't even have a bar. Like it's a capital without a bar, and it's the only place where I saw little like crack whores, and it's just awful, terrible place. I hate that place, and the anchorage is dire. And I don't know if you can zoom in there right at the bottom. You'll notice there's a marina there, and that's actually where the boat. That was
Yep,
his resting place. That's where the boat. That was my final destination. That's where I left the boat in the end. When I loop back down to
I
sell it.
do. Marina de Rivière Saint
Yeah, yeah.
Gourbière.
Good. I was so happy when I sold that boat that I didn't have to go back to that shithole town. I was because it was the worst place to leave the boat. Because it's like, oh god, I hate it. It's the middle of nowhere. But anyway, that's a different thing. But yeah. So yeah, sleeping. So yeah, everything's kind
So
of
what's
different.
the solution? What's the solution to sleeping? Like if you had a catamaran, it would be more balanced, I guess, and then it would probably be more
Yeah,
less
yeah.
rocky.
Nearly every boat was less rocky than my boat because I have this classic plastic old folk boat style are very narrow. The narrower the boat, the more it sways. So I had the
Hmm.
swayiest, but sometimes you go back on the dinghy and it looks like it's about to heel over. It's just banging side to side. It looks so ropey. And it's kind of spooky, at night you come up and you just from out of the black, you just see the silhouette of this boat rocking side to side, and that's where you're going to stay for the night. It's very creepy. Uh, um, awful if you're trying to like if you're a sailor and you think that if you're trying to get a girl back to your place, it's easy enough to get them back to the hotel, but like try let's go
Get
on
her on
this
the
little
dinghy.
dinghy, come across
Yeah,
all these waves, and it gets to this abandoned boat, different kind of thing.
and it's like rocking like crazy.
Yeah, and it's like old and but you can imagine it's if you were there seeing it for the first time, like what the hell? It's not like come back to my place for a couple of drinks, even if you're having friends back. It's like no thanks. Um, but yeah, so it's just different. And the thing about it is a few bad things because you only have the one dinghy, so you got to kind of come home as a group, or you can kind of like drop people back to the boat and come back,
Hmm.
and then you're on your own. So you kind of just got to think a bit more about what you're doing. Um, yeah, and but other like the having those sunsets. when you've done a good day sail and you park up at a lovely anchorage and you're by the beach and you're watching the sunset and you're in this new port energy, I call it. Like, you can get jaded very quick saying, but when you arrive at a new port and the sun is set and you've just arrived, you put on the tunes, you make a rum punch for yourself, and you're just dancing on top of the boat. You're ready to go. It's like, yeah, that's a great feeling. Um,
Yeah, that's a
I,
good vibe.
yeah. So, and you appreciate things so much more when you're saying, like, if you go to like showering as well. By the way, showering and toilets stuff. We had this sailing bag. It's called a solar shower. So you fill this bag up and it has like a black side and it heats up during the day. You hang it on the mast and it has a little nozzle. So that's how you
Why
shower.
would you need to shower though? Because you're in the Caribbean, it's warm. Couldn't you just take a dip in the ocean?
Yeah, but it's very salty. This is
Uh huh.
fresh water you use. So
Just to get the salt off.
yeah, and it's really cool. In some places, you have boats that come up to your boat, like, and they'll like sell you. They'll sell you diesel, like, right. They have these big barges that sell you diesel. They'll pump you full of water, or they'll sell like, you have people coming up selling you jewelry sometimes on the boat. There's a whole like floating marketplace. It really is a different world.
So
But
what do you do for food?
so usually, it was a pleasure because you eat a lot of fish in the Caribbean. Did manage to catch a fish at one point. That's in the next bit of the sailing trip. I failed miserably before that, but we'd eat out a lot at restaurants. Most nights we'd eat out, but a lot, for breakfast and stuff. We go to the market, get vegetables, eggs, cook up in the boat. There's a gas cooker there.
Hmm.
Yeah, you have your coffee, make up a meal. Yeah,
So that's pretty standard. Like the even on your tiny little boat. No offense, you
yeah,
had
yeah,
the
yeah, standard.
you
Yeah,
had the the equipment necessary to make a coffee and make some eggs.
yeah. These pocket cruisers are designed to live on. They have like two. You have two kind of two stoves, I guess, or two
Hmm.
places to put it.
Burners. Yep.
Yeah, two burners. You have your toilet, you have a bed. You have everything you need on a boat. And people live,
Okay.
like, loads of people live on them permanently. In fact, I didn't really cop it, but it's a great, very cheap way to live if you're not sailing. If you're just staying in port, it's like free rent, and people just you see all these old
I'm
guys.
very curious about this.
You see all these old guys who've been doing it for 20 years, who just like living off the boat for years, never even move port. They find a place they like and they just kind of, that's their life. That's where they
And
live.
they can park for free
Yeah.
because like the mooring is free.
Yeah. They put down their own mooring and they just live there for free. And that's
And
their
so your
life.
only, I guess, ongoing cost is the probably like some sort of boat insurance, or do you not even need that?
You only need
Or
boat
like a
insurance.
license?
No, you don't need a license. You don't need boat insurance. The only time you need boat insurance if you're going to get taken out of the water for repairs. The boatyard will ask for that. That's it. Some marinas will ask for it, of course, as well. Um,
And so where do you get like you kind of alluded to it, but where do you get the gas for I guess for the stove, or is it electric? And then like
it's gas, yeah.
uh it's gas. So how do you get the gas like in the boat?
So there's all the, like, on the water. You'll have places where you can refuel. They're like little petrol stations, but on the water. You can
Yeah,
tie
I've
up
seen the
your
gas
boat there,
stations.
or
And
you
so
can
they
go up
have
with
the
your
gas
dinghy.
stations for like the diesel for the boat, and then they also have the whatever it's called, natural gas
Well, the
for
natural gas
stoves.
is basically you'll have a guy, like a local dude, who'll collect them all like on a Tuesday, and he'll bring you back a full one.
Okay.
And to be honest, like, I
Because it's a
I
little tank.
yeah, but I only used 1.5 tanks for 4 months. Like, they're so economical. Gas is amazing,
Okay.
and I'd be using it every day, all the goddamn time. So you'd already have to do it. Water is another thing. I had giant, big tanks, and I would
Hmm.
like to fill them up with water, diesel, whatever needed, and you have to do a few runs.
Yeah,
If you
what are
couldn't
the
find.
considerations of fresh water? Is it pretty
Yeah, I mean, like,
economical?
yeah, it's pretty economic. You don't have to do it that often. I mean, you don't drink it. I had drinking water separately and use it for washing dishes, and the solar showers. You don't use that much of it. Yeah, so yeah, that's kind of it, like, day to day. Your day to day could be, going and provisioning. We call it provisioning, maybe, in the States.
Provision.
Yeah, provisioning.
I
Yeah,
like it.
exactly. Yeah.
So, but I imagine those beachfront restaurants, they're not expensive, but they're not cheap either if you're doing it every night. And then what? So you kind of have to like trek into town and find like a fruit market or.
Yeah, I mean, you can. It depends on where you are. Certainly, some islands are quite expensive. Like you're definitely dropping 20, 30 bucks on food a night. But then you can go to a place where it's like a local rotisserie chicken place, and you get a whole chicken for like $5. So it,
Hmm.
it depends. You can do it whatever way you want. There's cheap ways of doing things, and the French islands alcohol is expensive, but in the other islands it's dirt cheap.
Hmm.
So you can do it pretty cheap. Day to day living costs. Remember, your accommodation's free. Your transportation is, well, in theory, free with the wind. And by the way, you'd be surprised how much you spend on diesel. You spend very little. You can 20 bucks. You could go for hours and 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 hours. Maybe 20 hours. I don't know. But you use very little because they're designed to go through the water pretty handy. But it's very economical. You'd be
So you think
surprised.
like less than $100 a month, even if you're hopping islands?
Yeah,
Wow,
yeah.
that's pretty good.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'd say it depends on what you're using motor. Some people they always motor. They're just motor heads as they call them. I like to sail a lot. I try and avoid the motor because obviously anytime I use the motor, it always ended in disaster. Which probably brings us should bring us on to the final bit of the trip. We'll just close that loop.
Yeah,
Um,
sure, sure. And then if you have some time after, I'd like to ask some
absolutely.
non disaster related questions. But yeah, please kick us off.
Okay, so we lost the force day. And we had to get from St. Kitts to St. Martin, me and this guy Moritz, without the foresail. We just used the mainsail and motored, right?
Hmm.
Um, so got up to St. Martin, say goodbye to Moritz. He ended up hitching a ride on a boat to Bahamas, I believe. And my other brother came. Um, and we spent about 2 weeks. St. Martin's kind of a party place, but we spent about 2 weeks there because I had to figure out a way to get a front sail working. So what I did was I was able to reattach the wire and I converted the front sail to these thing called hanks. So instead of being pulled up a kind of a slot, it's similar to the front sail or the mainsail, which is basically these clips, and you could just pull up. You pull it up like you would a mainsail, so it slides up on these on these uh, on these clips. Now the only problem with that is easier to get down the sail in a storm or a crisis and easier to get it up. It's super easy, but you can't roll it. So you can't adjust the amount of sail that you have. So the great thing about a thing called a rolling furler, which is what most boats have, which it kind of rolls around the wire. So you can have like maybe just 10% of the sail out, 50%, 70%. You can adjust depending on how much wind you get. So you can alter if it's too much wind, you can alter it. But with the hanks, you have to go 100% or nothing, which means it only works in light winds. If it's heavy winds, you can't use it. So I don't. I think I used it. Well, I did use it once, and the forestay snapped again, but that happened a bit later. That was a disaster. It was like the last day. The last day, I finally said, "You know what? Back in Guadaloupe, I'll finally test these hanks out," and the whole forestay snapped again
Hmm.
because the force of the wind was too much. It snapped the wire. But anyway, that's kind of an anticlimactic end. But it was more interesting what happened beforehand. So my brother, I got him to do the same course as my parents, competent crew course. So he came out all ready to go, and we were sailing from St. Martin to Nevis. St. Martin, which is a lot. Oh, sorry, we are going to St. Bart's. Went to St. Bart's first, which is a French island,
Hmm.
which went pretty smoothly. And then we went to Nevis. Now, again, when Nevis didn't have a visa for here, we intended just to stop the night and head to Montserrat and Guadeloupe. So, anyway, we are heading to Nevis. And it was a pretty decent day. It was the first time we're going to this place called the Narrows. And the Narrows is this tiny bit of water between Nevis and St. Kitts. Now, boats that you charter, you're not allowed to go through the Narrows because there's a lot of it's not very well surveyed. Maybe you can pull it up on a map, you'll see it yourself. And there's a few rocks, underground rocks, and it's a small channel, so it can be a bit dangerous. And right at this point, because I've been trying to fish the whole time, right? And every time I pull in my line, there's just kelp. I just catch kelp. And I thought we were pulling up kelp. We were just coming up to the narrows and said, we better pull in this line because I need to be concentrating for this bit. And believe it or not, I was like, what? That's not a. I was really heavy, And actually, at some point, we had caught this big albacore tuna. We pull it in, and we're in the middle of going through the Narrows. So I'm trying to like pull in the thing, but I'm steering the boat with my foot. I'm like, God damn it! And it's fighting. It starts to come back. Starts fighting, and we're trying to find a hook to grab it. And it got to the point where I got it on camera. Thank God. Well, I'll show it in later episodes. My brother literally had to grab the fish with his bare hands at the side of the boat and pull it up onto the boat, uh, which is pretty cool. But that all went well. That all went fine. But we cooked the fish. The first time I ever fished it was very satisfying. But the next day, we set out for Montserrat, which is this British island. Actually, has a big Irish heritage.
Because it's a UK colony.
Yeah, but also there was a lot of Irish who escaped the British from St Kitts and moved there, and they actually they were the
Cool.
first people to settle in the island were Irish, and in fact, on the flag, they have a harp. It's green. It's a very strong Irish connection. And they have the one of the biggest St Patrick's Day. It's the only other country or only other territory in the world outside Ireland that St Patrick's Day is a national holiday.
Wow.
Yes, but they had the strictest COVID rules of all the Caribbean islands. So it was the place I wanted to visit, maybe most. But it was like a week quarantine. It was almost impossible to get in, and you couldn't arrive by boat as well. You had to fly in. They were still being extremely strict. Thought the sail was going well. We were a bit slow because we had no front sail. Couldn't use the front sail. We had to kind of motor sail with the main sail. Thought this is all going a bit too grand, too easy. And the weather at this time of year, so it was coming closer to the summer, so the seas were calmer than they were at the start of the trip. Thought it was going well, and I noticed around halfway through the trip that I look over and the lid for where you put in the diesel was not there. So I had filled up diesel early in the morning. I filled it up with diesel, and I forgot to put the goddamn lid back on. So for the half of that trip, it was on the side nearest the water. So I just see these waves constantly coming over the edge, filling the tank with seawater. So for about a few hours, little did I know, the tank was filling up with seawater. Any sailor knows seawater in a diesel tank is a death sentence for the engine. And I freak out, right? I freak out. So funny enough, I found the lid. It was in the cockpit, so I was able to screw it back on. But we had to kill the engine because I knew there was diesel. I didn't want to wreck it further. So we had no motor, and we only had a mainsail, so this slowed it down to the point where we end up 3-4 in the morning. So I never night sailed, kind of for an hour when we're coming to St Kitts, but I'd never night sail. We're forced to night sail in coming into a new port. We were supposed to maybe anchor up there for the night and then head on to Guadaloupe because we're not supposed to be in Montserrat. And also because of the way the winds were flowing, we couldn't angle into the capital, Little Bay. Now, let me explain something. There was a big volcano in Montserrat not so long ago. Half the island got wiped out. The population is halved. This only happened very recently. And there's an exclusion zone. There used to be the old capital, Plymouth, it's called. And the only place we could aim for safety in the night was this exclusion zone. And because of all the lava that had been in the sea, there was inadequate surveys, but we basically had no option. We don't need the mainsail, which, by the way, when we hit the lee side of the island, we basically lost wind power. So we couldn't. We were dead in the water again because the wind is being blocked by the island.
And remind us what the lee side means.
So the lee side is the Caribbean side of the island. So windward and leeward, they're the two sides, right? So windward is when you're on in this case,
the wind comes from the Atlantic, I guess.
Yeah, so if you're on the east side of the island, you're on the windward side.
Okay, gotcha.
You're on the leeward side if it's in protection of the island. But this it's a lot of these islands are quite mountainous, a lot of volcanoes, and it blocks all the wind, so it really kills it. So a lot of these time when you come up the Caribbean side, you have to motor because there's no wind. So wind dies. Water in the diesel tank. We're dead in the water. It's 3 in the morning. We're so tired. We've been sailing since 6 in the morning. I expected to get in there, by 6 o'clock. But now it's 9 hours later or whatever, 7 hours later. And it's 3 o'clock in the morning. Sorry, I don't know if it was 3 o'clock in the morning. It might have been 1 o'clock in the morning. It was very late. I can't remember exactly what time. We're just exhausted and we're dead in the water. And we're getting pushed out by the sea, basically to Venezuela, essentially, because I didn't really like our trajectory was Venezuela because we're getting pushed out so much because another thing, when the wind is coming from the east, so is the waves. So when you're sailing in the Caribbean, you're constantly being pushed west. So I'm like, we're dead in the water, so we're getting pushed out towards Central America. We have no choice but to run the engine with the salt water in it, the mix.
See how it goes.
Yeah, did not go well, turns out. So it works for like a time. I just hear it's like dies. So and every so often we tried it again. I would work for like maybe a couple of minutes. What did I do? Oh yes, what did I do again? I would, yeah. Basically, I was forced to do something that I loaded doing in Grenada, which was I had to basically pump out, uh, pump out the seawater, pump out diesel, the old diesel from the tank manually,
Hmm.
and replace it with fresh diesel. And how can I explain the difficulty of this? Especially, it was hard enough to do. It took me like 50 tries to do when I was on flat water. This was like in the ocean. So I was trying to figure out how to get decent fuel, healthy fuel, or some sort of healthy fuel into the tank. What I realized was I took some seawater and I took some diesel. I put them in a plastic cup or
Hmm.
plastic bottle, and I wanted to see how they interacted with each other. And what I realized was the seawater shrank straight to the bottom of the bottle. So I realized that they didn't mix at all. So I realized that, okay, so the seawater must have, because we paused the engine for so long, the seawater must all be at the bottom where the diesel where it takes in the fuel. So when we turn the engine back on, it was getting nothing but seawater.
Hmm.
Basically, that's why it stopped. So I figured, hey, if I bleed the engine a bit, um, and we just keep trying it and trying and try, eventually it'll flush out the seawater and it'll go back to, the ratio will get better and better. But there was so much damage done in that process. So that this theory did work. Theory did work. I emptied out the filters because the filters were filthy. They're full of they're full of all this crap from the sea, and got this fresh fuel in. Got it kind of working. It would break down, get it working, break down, get it working. But over hours and hours and hours, we eventually sail into this beach. And it's at night time. My brother has never anchored in his life. He's new to sailboats, and we have to sail into anchor again because of this problem with the engine. And we're sailing directly towards the beach. I'm like, pull down the mainsail. He has no idea how to pull down a mainsail. So we're just heading towards the beach. It's getting shallower and shallower. He's completely flustered. Doesn't know what's going on, and we have to maneuver to get the sail down, throw in the anchor, and then hope for the best. And long story short, we end up shipwrecked there for around 3 days. Had to go illegally on land. I had to completely replace all the diesel. So I emptied out the diesel tank, managed to get the thing working, and immigration copped on. Customs immigrant. It's a tiny island, right? It was still in lockdown. They copped on that our boat was there illegally, because one of the customs officers happened to be visiting the beach the last day we were there with his
Mm.
family, and he asked, "What's the name of your boat?" And I said, "Trade Winds." He goes, like, "You're not on the manifest. I work for customs." And it was late enough at night where he said, "I'm gonna, basically, we're gonna get arrested the next day, for being on the island legally. We're there 3 days at this point, or we're going to get apprehended, probably getting the boat confiscated." So basically, we had to speed off and escape Montserrat in the middle of the night.
Boat
Uh,
chase.
Yeah. Basically, but if we left super super early, they wouldn't reach us because we were down the south of the island. They were up the north of the capital. So I figured if we leave super super early, by the time they wake up and bring and the customs and immigration come up to where we were, we'd already left their territory. So but that was actually a really cool place. Montserrat was really cool because we were there, three of the islands. We are having a good time there. Very very cheeky what we did, but yeah, I don't care. It's COVID times, but so we got there and then we went headed towards Guadaloupe. The engine cut out a couple of times, but it kind of was working. Um, we sailed most of it, and then finally ended up at, and that was because we couldn't use the engine. We had to do night sail again, so we had to sail through the day and then into the night to Guadaloupe. We ended up anchoring off the coast of northern Guadaloupe. We anchored at night, so couldn't check the anchor. There was actually they had just lifted the
What does that
restrictions.
mean? Check the anchor.
Like we threw down the anchor in the port and checked the anchor to make sure it holds, so
Okay.
you're secure. A very windy anchorage called Deshay, I think it's called Deshay, and it was the first weekend that Guadeloupe had lifted restrictions, so there was actually a big fucking party on going on till 4 in the morning. So we were like, oh my god, it was only like 1 o'clock or something. So we like get on the dinghy, get ready really fast, and we end up partying. It was like we were so happy we made it. And Guadeloupe was like my final because the boat had it at this stage. I had Guadeloupe was the only place that had a marina because there was no Nevis has no place to store it. St. Kitts and Nevis is terrible for boats. There's no place to store it basically. No marinas. Montserrat had none. So Guadeloupe was the first place, its first safe haven from St. Martin. And I knew that was the trip was done by then because the boat had it. We'd know like the oh, I should mention on this trip we tried the forestay. The forestay snapped. As I said again, um, the hanks didn't work, or I said it was too much force. So motor was done. The forestay was done. We limped to Deshay, which is near Bastia, and we were partying. It was a great feeling just to be near land because we knew there was no more offshore sailing to be done. But then we wake up the next morning. I wake up the next morning because it can't end on a high. And I noticed the sky is rotating. Now skies don't rotate. It's clouds don't rotate. And of course, I popped my head out. The anchor had broken free, and we were headed right into a load of rocks. We were pushed load into rocks. So it's like, wake up! Totally so hungover. We're like scrambling, get the engine on, and had to had to prevent being slammed into a load of rocks. Yeah, and so that was that, and then we ended up in Bastia. Same thing happened again the very last day. Anchor broke in that notoriously bad anchorage, and we had to scramble. But eventually, limped into the marina. They thank God they had a place because all the other marinas were booked up as well. That was another problem I had. All the marinas, it was busy season, but there was one place in this marina I could leave it there and finally get rid of the boat. My last thing that happened was got the boat into the berth, but I missed the support mooring buoy to throw the rope over right at the berth. So to prevent the boat slamming into another boat, literally just as we were parking, I had to dive into the water and tie it up. I don't know if you've ever dived into a marina, into the water marina. You should never do that. You know why? Because where do all the toilets flush? There's no holding tanks. They flush. Dude, I came out of there looking like the swamp monster. So I was literally floating past, like swimming past bits of shit. I was oily. I was black and there was shit in my hair. And it was like, I had to pull myself. So after doing the morning bite, I crawled up the walls looking like this monster thing. And that was the last time. That was the way it ended. The trip ended.
So it ended in Guadeloupe.
Yeah, me covered in crap. So I had a shower then. I was so happy. And I hated that town, but got it sold there. Thank God. While I was away, I didn't have to come back. But then after that, it didn't end in Guadeloupe because I said I was planning. I left Dominica because I was thinking I was going to end in Grenada. If I got all the way back down, but the boat had it. So me and my brother, we flew to Dominica then because the last country to tick off the list of the whole Caribbean, and so it was amazing. Got to have land shits. You don't appreciate land shits till you stay in a boat for a long time. And like showers, beds, So we spent a week, and Dominica is amazing. It's the most beautiful island you could possibly imagine. It's famous. It's called the Nature Island. It has waterfalls, all these amazing treks, volcanoes, and
Hmm.
spent a week there just absolutely enjoying that. That was a real vacation, and that's how the trip ended. It was a wonderful way to end the trip exploring that island. And I'd finished the mission complete. My mission was to finish every country in the region. Did it, sailed it, overcome all these incredible obstacles. Learned a lot about myself. I aged, man. I aged. I've literally have way more gray hairs. The skin exposure, I said the sun exposure, my skin. I feel older, and emotionally and spiritually, man. It really just aged me. It was an experience. Wow.
And did you make it to Anguilla?
I did. Anguilla is up on St. Martin. We could have
Hmm.
taken a day trip because the only islands up there I didn't visit were Anguilla and Saba. Saba is this tiny island. It's supposed to be amazing, but it was just too out of the way, and it's really really bad place to like you can't anchor there because it's a giant volcano basically, and it's so steep too. You have to use these mooring buoys. It's
I guess
notoriously bad.
actually it's a British overseas territory, so it wasn't necessary
I
to
didn't care.
cross
I
off.
didn't give
Yeah,
a crap about
yeah.
Anguilla's. It's not a country. Apparently, it's expensive. It's just beaches. It's like a tourist British place. I had zero interest in going. And also, it's beside St. Martin. So if I ever went back to the region, I wanted to kind of save a little bit of something because I want to go back to Saba as a vacation. And you have to go to St. Martin to go to Saba. And Anguilla's right there. So I thought, yeah, I had no interest in going. St. Martin was where I wanted to go because it's the fun. It's like famous for its nightlife. It's kind of like and it's a big boating scene. St. Martin's a really cool spot. It was kind of a good ending point. No interest. Could have taken the ferry over to the day trip, but nah. Um, yeah,
So the trip aged you. You're a wiser man for it.
I'm a lot more zen. I like dealing with all that stuff. Nothing bothers me, honestly. I'm so like people have noted it since I came home. You know, things going wrong with business and just general panic stuff that normal people would panic about. I just nothing bothers me anymore. I've been through. I feel like I've been through hell and back, so I'm kind of very zen now. Yeah,
Absolutely. And when we were talking offline, you said that you had, being on the boat, you had a lot of time to do some thinking.
yeah. Well, you're at the helm for 8 9 hours on average a day. Sometimes 12 hours, sometimes 18. And you're kind of just you in the water. Something about being at sea. Nothing it simplifies life. You know, it's just a basic plane. You're very clear headed. It's very relaxing. And you don't care about anything else. Like I don't think I checked any emails or didn't worry about my. Luckily, I had good managers in place. Didn't have to worry about the business at all. Um, yeah, it's just you and nature, and you feel like you're out there with some sort of force. I don't know if you call it. Some people would call it God or something, the universe. I don't know, but it's just you, and that's it. You and nature, and there's nothing else. It's an amazing feeling, and it gives you time to reflect on life. You know, what are you? I kept thinking like, what am I doing here? Well, am I doing this to prove something to myself? Am I doing it for other people? I don't think so. I've done that enough. Maybe a little bit though, you know, just kind of prove myself, or maybe some thing about masculinity. Was it like, oh yeah, I feel like a man now? But if I think I dealt with a lot of those issues earlier in my life. I'm not exactly sure. I feel like it kind of finished an arc for me because the whole Mexican pirate thing, when that ended, the sailing bit almost was like a cruel joke I had on myself to do it after because I feel like I larped as a pirate for 10 years in nightclubs with sombreros and swords. I was like, I feel like I really have to be an actual pirate, or you know, a sailor. Like I feel like otherwise I kind of feel like sort of a, you know, like what am I doing? I'm like a guy in a costume. And I don't know. Part of me wanted to just make it real.
Makes sense.
Yeah,
And were you reading books about the history of, I guess, the history of exploration and, the age of discovery of these islands and things like that to get a bit of a historical context?
Yeah, I love history. I really am into it. So everywhere I went, I would consume a lot of history. You know, whether it be listen to podcasts. Obviously, I had a few books with me as well. Um, yeah, I was super interested in all that aspect of things. I mean, the islands have a very interesting history, but essentially it boils down to mostly like 89% of it is the British and French going at it. That's the story of most of the Caribbean, and it's interesting the nuances and differences in each country. I much prefer the Windward Islands, which is the southern ones like
Hmm.
Grenada, Saint Lucia, Saint Vincent and the Grenadines. Not a big fan of the French islands. People are just a bit less friendly. It's very touristy. They're the most populated islands. Um, I love Dominica. It's the least visited one. Uh, and if you go up north, St. Kitts, Nevis, Antigua, Barbuda, St. Martin, it becomes very let's say more European, more a lot more white people, a lot more developed, a bit more familiar, less adventurous, and a little less friendly in a way. Because if you go to the Southern Islands, they just don't have that many foreigners, so they're a bit more, with the exception of Saint Lucia, but they're a bit more welcoming, I suppose.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, there was the little nuances is was interesting. Uh,
I don't want to end the podcast without asking about the boat hitchhikers and that sort
oh
of whole
yeah,
network,
absolutely.
the whole network of I don't know, just
Well,
like
let's bring it back to the
sailors that know
readers.
each other's and the
Yeah.
Facebook groups and all that. So,
So if you're out there and you're feeling adventurous, guys, and you wanted to hitch a lift on a boat across the Atlantic, it's pretty easy to do actually. If you go down to Portugal, they all depart from Portugal. So there's kind of the route they take is Portugal down to the Canary Islands, right? And there's two routes you can go. Some go directly across from the Canary Islands, but most go down to Cape Verde in Africa.
hmm.
Um, and there's a lot of captains with boats want to do this crossing to the Caribbean, and they're looking for crew. And there's these, they do it either live on the spot. You know, these are older people, so a lot of like hanging up flyers, or you go to marina bars and marinas and you'll see flyers for people, your crew wanted. And usually what happens is, so you have a lot of young people who do this. Some of them know basic sailing, some of them don't know anything about sailing. And usually the crew actually pay the captain. So it could be a €10 a day, for if it helps with provisioning fuel. um, Sometimes captains will even pay crew if they're competent for the trip, but usually it's kind of like you pay your way a bit. So yeah, it's a whole ecosystem, and it's very, these people who come across the Atlantic. These young people, they're amazing. They're in their 20s. They're taking backpacking to a whole nother level, and they've got some great stories. And this brings me to some great stories I hear. Like, you should talk to Moritz, the guy I was the hitchhike across the Atlantic. I'll get you on to him. He's a really really cool guy from Germany. He's still going around the world, hitchhiking on boats. He got some great stories.
Where in Portugal do they leave from?
I think it's just the Algarve. I think there's I'm not exactly sure. Maybe Faro, or Lagos. That'd be the bottom of Portugal. The earlier you can intercept the boats, the more of a chance you have of finding a boat. Because I know a lot of people who go to the Canaries can find it, have a difficult time, especially if you don't arrive early, because a lot of people have stocked up on crew in Portugal, but the Canaries is the main spot. The earlier you
Okay,
can get there in the season, I'm talking, they cross usually, I think October you want to get there.
October. So
November it
that's
might be
like
a
the
bit
best
late.
time of year to do the crossing.
Yeah, yeah, because you want to get over to the Caribbean for the start of the season, which is around,
Makes sense.
yeah, like between December, January. Usually, the boats want to be over there for January, February, and get the whole season before June.
And
Uh,
where in the Canaries specifically are they often meeting up? Is it
all
on
over the
Tenerife
place.
or
No, it's all
Santa
over the
Cruz?
place.
Okay.
There's marinas all over the place. I mean, um, yeah, and there's Facebook groups for it. It's usually, uh, you know, uh,
What do you search?
Canaries Cruisers Group, Grenada Cruisers Group,
So
or
cruisers is the keyword. Like when you're in the Caribbean
yeah,
and you're checking
bingo.
the Facebook group for every
A-
country, you're
And
looking
there's actually
for
an Atlantic
Grenada
Crossing.
cruisers.
Yeah, and there's actually an Atlantic Crossing Facebook group for this exact purpose.
Okay.
It's called Atlantic Crossing East to West, and there's another one from West to East. So yeah, it's a fascinating thing, and oh god, speaking of just ending up with some stories I heard.
Sure.
Um, you know, there was there was ones who were crossing back over, and they lost the mast and they ran out of fuel, had to get rescued. There was another guy who really interesting. The most interesting one was this guy was in the Pacific. Well, the Pacific is a big ocean, and they hit a storm and they lost the mast, and so you're absolutely on your own. I mean, when you leave Panama to get to the next island, the Marquise, I think it's called, you're talking about a month without land on a good boat. The bigger the boat, the faster it sails. But on a good boat, it's 30 days without land. They got hit a typhoon or whatever, and they're called in the southern hemisphere. I think they're called typhoons in the southern hemisphere, but lost the mast, so they were stranded, and they had to construct a mast out of the boom, which is the bottom part of what supports. It's basically another piece of metal at the
Okay.
bottom of the mast, and they had to make like this tiny little sail, and they spent like 3 months just trying to find land, and they had to like fish. And they had a rainmaker. You can be completely self sufficient on a boat, by the way, because you can get solar panels. I had a wind generator, for example, for power, which is like a fan or a turbine. You can have solar panels, and then for water, you have a thing called a rainmaker or water maker, which actually desalinates seawater and supplies you with fresh water. So you can even, and then if you take into account fishing, you can be completely 100% self sufficient on the boat because you got transport free, accommodations free, you can cook, you say you can fish, and you can generate water, so you can survive in any conditions on a boat. And that's how they did. And they because anyone crossing the Pacific has to basically wouldn't, or crossing an ocean. Most people wouldn't cross an ocean, especially the Pacific, without a water maker. So a lot of people do it on the Atlantic because there's so many boats coming across the Atlantic that you send out an SOS call, you're probably going to get taken care of. But the
Hmm.
Pacific, you want to have that boat sorted. And my boat had previously been taken across the Atlantic by a guy who owned it for 40 years, a British guy. So that's why it had the likes of a wind, what you call it, a wind generator on it and stuff.
Hmm. And so you sold the Caribbean boat in Guadaloupe. You still have the other boat in the Med. If you were going to do this again, either in the Caribbean or just like maybe in a different part of the world, there's definitely a lot of a cool. There's a lot of cool zones for boating and stuff. How would you do it differently next time? Would you get a different type of boat, a bigger boat?
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, tell me.
Well, listen, I need a break. That was I needed like a 10-year break. I'm talking 10-year break. I would do it if I was doing it again. I definitely get a bigger boat, definitely like a 50 footer or a 40 footer. Ideally, a catamaran if I had the cash. I get a newer boat, so I just spend more money on it because I'm a new sailor. I got a new kind of a beginner boat, and I didn't want to blow out of cash in it because, as you can see, I kind of wrecked the first one. I wrecked both of them. One set fire, the one in the Mediterranean,
Hmm.
and this one ran aground, lost all the sails. Blah, blah, blah. So thank God I didn't spend money on it. But now I have a bit more experience. I get a nice, but somewhere that you enjoy like actually being on. That's not old, and so something bigger, newer, a bit more expensive. Well, a lot more expensive. Yeah, and I mean, I love a catamaran, but catamarans aren't great for crossing oceans. They're the most comfortable, but I'd love to do maybe one day when I have kids or I'm a bit older, like 50, 60, do the Pacific, because the Pacific lends itself to sea exploration because there's so many islands. Maybe the last countries I ever take off on my list will be the Pacific countries, and it's best done by boat, but it's a huge undertaking. I have no interest in the ego, the bragging rights that come with crossing oceans. I have no desire to cross the Atlantic for the sake of it. Everyone I talked to who did it said it's super boring, and you're just basically a month, uh, just kind of doing nothing. I mean, the thing is, you're going one direction. You only have to set your sails once because you're not
Hmm.
changing direction, and then you just kind of you're on autopilot essentially. Um,
And so you have no desire to just get like a pretty nice 50-foot boat, not too much like effort, and just sort of cruise around from your base in Malta and
yeah,
just sort
I
of cruise around the Caribbean and go to, I don't know, go to Sicily and maybe up to Ireland and
Well,
stuff
no,
like that.
well, I wouldn't go to Ireland's a long way, but Sicily,
Yeah.
yes. In fact, I'm only 2 months ago, I went over to Sardinia to bring it over to Sicily. one with my dad, and because it's been a while since I've been over there, couldn't get the engine working. And we kind of, I got it working in the end, but we'd missed
Right.
the
But
weather
I meant
wind.
like a bigger boat, like a leisure boat. I don't
Oh no,
know.
no, yeah, no. So I'm gonna say I'm selling the one I have now. I'm looking at maybe I'm not sure when, but in maybe the near future, getting like a 40 footer or 38 footer. 38 footer is a really nice size, and a wide one though, so it has lots of space because you got to think about maintenance costs and keeping in a marina. 38 foot's a good sweet spot. And it's easy to handle as a solo sailor because the bigger the boat, the more difficult it is to handle. 38 foot would
Mm,
be a good size. The one I have in Sardinia is only 27. And also a 38 foot, then I can actually do charters. So if I've tourists coming, they want to party, like 6 or 8 of them. I want to,
mm,
they spend like 500-600 euros a day just to be taken out for to Gozo or Camino, which is the next island over from Malta. It's just like you go back and forth 2 hours each way, and just
mhm,
make 500-600 quid. It'll justify keeping it in the marina there, and then maybe you go to Greece, Tunisia, all the stuff that's close to me. Like Tunisia is just across the way. It's a cool spot, has a lot of good
mhm.
facilities. Sicily's amazing. Yeah, I absolutely. I've been seriously considering that. Maybe not. Maybe 2-3 years. I got other priorities right now. Um, actually want to go back to just some basic land traveling, with a backpack and stay, or just overlanding it. I need a little break from the sea, but yeah, I would. In fact, I plan to do it with the other boat, but I'm just done. I went back and it's just kind of old and small. I'm like, oh, I'll just sell the thing. The purpose of
Yeah.
that boat was to train for the Caribbean, so the purpose has exhausted itself. I don't want to keep it.
And
Uh,
you probably picked up some stuff about kind of sailing in Latin America. If you just wanted to give us a little bit of free game, because this is
yeah,
the My Latin Life podcast.
absolutely.
I always thought that Panama would be a really cool place to have a boat because you're out of the hurricane belt, and you got two sides of the ocean there, the Pacific and the Caribbean, and there's just so many cool islands, and it's super tropical and stuff. So I always thought that would be a cool place to, and that's typically where you register boats anyway. So I always thought that'd be a cool place to potentially own a boat. And then you could kind of like, I don't know, like rip around the Caribbean, maybe over to Colombia and Venezuela from there, stuff like that. What have you kind of like picked up about sailing in Latin America?
Quite a lot. So because my kind of, I had another plan B, if this one didn't go so, I did so badly. If I couldn't sell the boat, for example, and I got the boat back to Grenada as opposed to Guadaloupe, where I had a free mooring, if that had happened, I, as opposed to spending, it wasn't cheap, the marina in Guadaloupe, and if the boat was in good condition. So let's say if the boat was as I left it, and it was in good condition, and I was back in Grenada. I did a whole research for a trip where I would go down, across the ABC Islands, Venezuela to Cartagena. In fact,
Mhm.
on this trip, I was even considering getting as far as Cartagena, but hurricane season and all that. But and then yeah, so you can go up and down. So from Panama up to Mexico, Gulf of Mexico, back down. It's a lot harder to go east. So it's very difficult to go east. You can do it, but you have to tack. So you have to kind of go in a zigzag, and it's just a lot of struggle. So if you were in Latin America, Panama is a great spot, or Colombia, because you can kind of go up the coast, the Caribbean Sea. I said it's
Yeah,
harder to get all the,
you just hug it along
yeah,
like
bingo.
Nicaragua and Honduras and all that.
Yeah, and it's
Okay.
perfect because that's north to south. North to south is the best way to sail in the Caribbean, and that's the easiest way to sail. Now, I mentioned about doing another trip, a big trip when I was older, and I would buy the boat in Panama because there's so many boats for sale there as well. There's a huge boating community, and of course, they cross the Panama Canal, which, by the way, costs a bit of cash, I believe. And that's how all the boats who end up crossing the Atlantic and want to go through the Pacific, they all come through Panama. And what happens is a lot of couples, they buy the boat in the Mediterranean, like, oh, we're going to go around the world. They get across the Atlantic, and the wife is like, hell no, am I doing another ocean? And they put the boat up for sale in Panama. So there's loads of boats for sale in Panama, for that trip. So yeah, Panama would definitely be 100% the place to do it. Um, and yeah, so that's what I would do. I mentioned about not having not ego sailing across an ocean. If I was doing the Pacific, I would definitely cheat. I would skip the whole 30 days at sea, no sea, and I would go start in French Polynesia, which is right in the middle. before you hit
Mhm.
any of the other nations. And kind of like you're halfway across then. And that's the fun part because between French Polynesia and Papua New Guinea, that's all the countries and islands. Because the fun bit, being out at sea for days and days does not appeal to me. I like the port bit. I like the landing in a port,
Yeah, I
going to a
agree with you.
restaurant. That's the fun part.
The dinghy. I agree
Yeah.
with you. And so do you think you could make it from, like, Cartagena to Cancun?
Oh yeah. Wait, Cancun is on. Yeah. Oh, easy. That's an easy trip. But it's like the say. It's similar distance to what I did. That's an easy trip. Yeah, that would be a great trip. You know why that would be good as well, because compare Central America to where I was. Right, you're not offshore because you're coastal cruising. It's called so
Mhm.
there's different. You've coastal cruising and offshore. You're not in open ocean because you're always along the coast. So anything wrong that happens, you're just the land is right there. There's something about seeing land that is very comforting. When you go out and you can't see land in any direction, that's kind of it's something very unsettling. It's kind of scary. But as soon as you can peak an island or peak land, there's something that's kind of okay. It's going to be all right. So you can do that the whole way. I would love to do that trip. And in fact, to be a perfect little spin up, it's the distances are not so big. You've got a lot of variety. I think there might be a bit more crime there. I'm not sure, but because you got to think about crime as well. There's a lot of boats get boarded, people get killed. And it doesn't happen that often, but people rob boats. There's a lot of pirates still. But yeah, that'd be a good trip if you were thinking about doing something. Yeah, I mean, keep the boat in Cartagena or Panama. That'd be pretty amazing.
That's awesome, man. You're definitely inspiring me and, probably the listeners as well. We've been going a while now, but I know you maybe wanted to touch on like one or two more things just about challenging yourself or about the audience capture. So I don't know, what do you want to talk about next?
Yeah, so I had a lot of time to reflect out there, and sad as it is to say, like I did feel, I said I felt aged by the end of it, and I was looking at, where I am in my life. 36 now, don't have kids yet. I think a lot of that's to do with, I said, audience capture because I had this kind of reputation. I felt like I had to maintain with the whole naughty nomad thing, as small as that reputation was. But I kind of feel like it drove it drove me. I didn't drive my life. That kind of thing drove me. I was a victim of what you would call audience capture. I wrote about this a couple of years ago in a blog post, but it's very people are talking about it more today. And I was talking to you about like different dating coaches I know, and if you're a dating coach and your income derives from you being a single guy, like good luck starting a family because you're not gonna get out of your own way. But I was wondering about sailing there and putting my life in danger so much. I was thinking, God, what part of this was done to kind of show other people that I had it in me or I was cool. I did it for myself mainly for the challenge, definitely. But I'm not going to lie and say there was not some part of it that kind of took a little bit of glee and thinking, oh my God, I'm going to get all this cool footage and going to get so much likes and views and all this stupid stuff. Um, it wasn't worth risking your life over. Um,
Mhm.
I think only it's. I don't know if this is very good general advice, but I suppose everyone's kind of got the brand of me now with their social media. Everyone's trying to look cool. People dying deaths for Instagram selfies. Um, and especially now, we're also glued to our phones, and we live in that world, that virtual world, so much now in comparison with the real world. We can get lost in image and trying to look cool, and you can kind of lose yourself in that. You really can. And that was a thought that kept coming to my head because when you're out there in the sea, no internet, no phones, you're out there, and it's just you. You are detached in a way that most people would never be detached in their lifetimes. You know, it's one thing to have no internet connection. It's one thing to have no people around. It's one thing to have absolutely nothing around, and you're effectively in a desert. It feels like you're walking into the desert because there's the sea is a type of desert. There's nothing you can't. You're kind of got this little caravan of safety, this little thing that's floating that's keeping you safe, but everything else around you is basically death, inhospitable death. Um, and when you're out there on your own, you kind of have a different perspective of Like, what the hell am I caring about what anyone else thinks? Like, who gives a shit? It's just me, and it's that's just all we got. We got this life, and you're your own company. It's only you in your head at the end of the day. On your deathbed, it's you and you. And I think people now are less in touch with themselves than they ever were before, because they're so busy trying to put up a face or a mask, and trying to be what everyone else wants them to be, that they kind of get lost in that. So I would encourage people in general to isolate themselves or detach in some way. Go off. I know it sounds stupid, this whole thing, going off to the mountains and meditating, but is it so crazy? All that kind of stuff. I think every now and then a digital detox at the bare minimum
Hmm.
should be done by everyone, because it's amazing how content and how relaxing it is when you do that kind of thing. I'm trying to be insightful here. I think I'm failing miserably.
No, it's all right. I mean, dude, you've definitely lived a lot more than most people will in their entire lifetime, and you're still in your mid 30s. Um, for some context, you've been like all over Africa. You've spent time in the desert, so you can compare desert and ocean, I suppose. And I remember a tweet from you recently where you were kind of searching for ideas for what to do next, because you've written books, you've done the sailing trips, you've uh, done a lot of conquering, and yeah, like what do you think is the next chapter for you?
you know, this is kind of a hard one, because I said the kind of the sexual conquest stuff was my 20s. I feel like I got a lot of that poison out. Travel a lot as well, 120 countries. The business side of things, been successful as an entrepreneur. I would like to be more successful. That's an ongoing thing, because 4 bars are great now, but I feel like I'm not there yet, where I want to be, because the coronavirus, like, I don't know how it didn't take out all the bars, but now we're back stronger than ever. It's great. Things are looking optimistic, but obviously I'm thinking about family. And I used to be, I came back from the sailing trip thinking that children is kind of one part of my life that I haven't, one part of life that I haven't experienced. Um, and I feel like that it'll give you a type of a joy and contentment, or a richness that is not found in just pleasure seeking or adventuring. A quiet contentment that's kind of you'll bring with you for the rest of your life. But I used to be 100% sure I was one of kids and all that stuff, but I'm 36 and stuff, and I'm not actually sure anymore that I want that.
I was
Um,
gonna say, haven't you been in Malta for like several years now? And I feel like the whole time you've been talking about, okay, now it's the time
Starting a
to have
family,
kids, man.
yeah,
Dude, just get to it.
yeah. Well, like I don't want to get into too much personal details. Let's just say I was getting to it, or the situation is only recently, though. The situation is I've
Mm,
been actually rethinking things. I don't want to get into it too much, but
no, it's
I'm
fine.
actually because I'm thinking about a lot of other things, about like, how does this look in 10, 20 years, and I'm grappling with that, because I they say you're never ready for kids. I knew that, and I kind of trust the process, but I don't know if I really am. It's not so much the kids bit; it's the whole settled life thing. Um,
Is Malta starting to feel small?
No, I love Malta. Life in Malta is great. It is tiny, it is small, and it feels small, but you can always travel. It's like €10 to fly to Sicily. I travel plenty. So I don't really feel like that. I love the life here. Could I live somewhere else? Yeah, I could. I wouldn't mind travel. I could live in Bali for a bit, or I'd love to move back to Ireland. To be honest, I love Ireland, but it's impossible. The housing situation over there is disastrous. Um, and the weather's terrible. Yeah, I kind of feel after the sailing trip, I feel like my life for the first time in forever is a bit up in the air, because I kind of had always had these goals I was working towards, and now I kind of feel like, okay, I didn't
You've
have a
done
next
everything on
step.
the bucket list.
I didn't have a next step after the sailing, because that seemed like such a difficult thing to do. And now that I've done it, I'm like, oh, now what do I do? I mean, I'm interested in, like, I finally finished the audiobook, my audiobook, which is took a lot of work, and I'm keeping myself busy with plenty of projects. The video stuff, I'm going to focus a bit more on YouTube. I basically took a giant break from YouTube because I was focusing on the audiobook. But
Mhm.
on like that's fun and all. Running the business, I keep myself very busy. But in terms of like an overarching plan, it's the first time I kind of feel like it's a little bit up in the air. You said for North Americans, LATAM is the best place, and for that exact reason, I 100% agree with you. If I was a North American, LATAM would 100 be the play because it's so close. If you Asia is so goddamn far, even Europe is pretty far. I mean, Ireland's not that bad, but it is the place. That's the same reason why when I came back from New York, I had a desire to stay in Europe, so I went as far south as possible because of that proximity to your home country. Like, I think people overestimate that. If you were living in Australia or New Zealand, like, trying to get home for weddings, funerals, you completely break away from your life, really. So I do think that proximity is really important. I think I agree with you that Latin America is definitely the spot because I don't think the Caribbean compared to Latin America from the bits I've been to, I think they're much better. I think it's much better than most of the Caribbean.
100%. You must be getting close to Malta citizenship, right? I think it's like 5 years of residency.
I could get it, yeah. I don't really have an interest at the moment because I mean it's still a European Union passport. I might get it just for the crack, just to have it, in case
Yeah.
I never need to escape a country. Yeah, I should actually look into it. Um, it wouldn't offer me much value in terms of because it's another European passport and I'm a resident here. But why not? If I can, I should.
Yeah, there's definitely value to any second passport, even
Yeah,
a second passport in the EU.
yeah, I agree. And I have thought about it, but just haven't lit the fire under my arse yet.
It should be probably coming up, so you should probably start looking into it and see how you might need to organize a little bit to make that a reality.
I can get it now for sure. Yeah, that's cool. And like my brother and my mom and dad moved over here as well, so they're living here as well. They loved visiting me. They're like, oh, we're just gonna move over. And they help out with the bars now and everything. We've expanded. That's the reason why it's expanded so rapidly. Um, yeah, so it's a good life here now. I have to say, I'm not in a rush to go anywhere. I think I obviously I bought a place here, so I'll always have a base here. Uh, yeah, so it's all good. Life's good. Yeah, so I think we can kind of start to finish up there. I have no exciting adventures planned in the immediate future. I'm going to be going back to Latin America at some point early next year because my best friend Dan, who I was best man at his wedding, he actually bought a van, converted van, and he's going
Hmm.
from Alaska to Argentina. So he's doing the whole Pan American Highway right now as we speak. I think he's all the way down he's in New Mexico now. So he's done all Canada, Alaska, and he's going to go all the way through South America. And then I think he's actually got a really a 6-figure job lined up in Peru. So he's going to do all the continent and stuff. So I'm going to probably join him and his wife who were introduced. He lived in Oman. I actually introduced them. Or sorry, they were. I didn't introduce them, but anyway, actually, I'm not going to get into that story. But yeah, they're traveling through, so I'm going to join them. They have his wife has a lot of contacts in Venezuela. She went to kind of a
Hmm.
nice school and was with her friends are kind of political. They're high up in the political scene there, and they have quite the connections there. So it would be so cool to fly over and maybe in February and join for the Venezuela portion. So let's see.
That's awesome, man. Thank you so much for joining us and making My Latin Life podcast, where you finally shared in detail all the adventures from the Caribbean sailing journey. Super super epic. And thanks again for your time, man. And uh, thanks for joining us for your second appearance on the Latin Life podcast.
It was an absolute pleasure. And for those who want to follow me, you can look at Naughty Nomad, Twitter, Instagram. Unfortunately, I just signed TikTok and at the Naughty Nomad, and I hate it already. Uh, but you got to play the game now, and obviously YouTube. I'm really trying to. YouTube is where I'm putting most of my focus, and I have a lot of awesome videos out there. I put up my first trip, my sailing trip one. I just put up another one of visiting the gun markets where they make the guns in Pakistan near the Afghan border. Went there as well. So a lot of exciting stuff going on there. Yeah, check out the audiobook. My Life is a Mexican Pirate. Put a lot of work into it, and people love it so far. You can check out the reviews. Yeah, and absolute pleasure being on the podcast again. And hopefully, I'll have more adventures in the future for you.
Yeah, I've read both of the adventure travel books, and they're the type of book that you could get through in one or two sittings. It's absolutely addicting. Um, One of the greatest minds in adventure travel, Mark Zolo. Thanks so much for joining us.
Absolute pleasure. Take care.